Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Laura Lopez. Laura Lopez was born on November 11, 2000, in Plata, Argentina. Her older sisters, Melissa and Damaris, who were 18 at the time of her birth, love her very much. Tragically, their mother passed away when Laura was just 3 years old, and her 3 sisters were taken care of by their father. Although he initially tried to support the family, he later fell into alcoholism a few years after. Despite the challenges she faced, Laura was known for her sweet and loving personality. Her sister affectionately called her Cello, a nickname that everyone who knew her called. Years later, when their father lost his job, the family needed to find additional work. At 18, Laura started selling fried pastries during the day while attending high school in the evening. In her free time, she focused on caring for her nieces and nephews. At the beginning of her studies, she hoped to secure a good job to improve her family's financial situation and bring them stability. Unfortunately, an unexpected incident occurred that hindered her plans. On September 12, 2019, Laura and Damaris spent the entire day enjoying tea together. Damaris had just completed renovations on her house, and Laura playfully remarked that Damaris had never made tea quite like that before. Regardless, it was a lovely day. Later, Laura went to school, where her classmates noticed something unusual about her behavior. She decided to sit at the back of the class instead of her usual seat and left shortly after 20 minutes, when the lesson ended. When Laura returned home around 11:30 p.m., a friend greeted her. They chatted, had a few drinks, and took selfies for social media. They said their goodbyes at 3 a.m. Laura expressed that she was feeling tired and to get some sleep. The next day, Melissa sent a message to Laura asking if she had seen a doctor for her ear problems. When Laura didn't respond, Melissa started to feel anxious. Worried about Laura's whereabouts, Melissa reached out to Damaris for information, which only heightened her concern. After hours of searching, Melissa and Damaris went to the police station for help. However, they were told they would have to wait 48 hours since Laura was last seen before they could file a missing person report. The officers thought Laura might have had a boyfriend, since it is common for teenagers to encounter situations like this. On Saturday the 14th, the police received a report, and they initiated a search, but unfortunately, it was too late. On Sunday the 15th, 2 fishermen working in the El River's breakwater area, just 15 kilometers from Laura's home, noticed something unusual. They remained calm until they discovered a young girl's body floating in the water, with limbs and a skull. They quickly contacted the authorities to report their find. When the officers arrived, they saw that the attack had been extremely violent, and it was clear that the attacker was skilled with knives. The detectives were actively looking for clues in the crime scene. They found a fabric bag, leggings, and underwear in the river, but they were completely destroyed. During their investigation, they also discovered 2 rings and, after searching the riverbed, found a knife stained with blood. The officers contacted Laura's family, and when Damaris arrived at the location, she quickly identified the clothing as Laura's belongings. Fishermen had found Laura's limbs and skull in shallow waters downstream from the initial discovery, which was then handed over to the forensic team for examination. Dr. Carlos Gordillo conducted the autopsy and determined that the death was caused by a severe blow to the head, which led to internal bleeding and increased pressure in the brain. A blow to the back of the head left her unconscious. Laura suffered between 2 and 4 hours of intense pain. Additionally, bruises were found on her arms, indicating that she had been beaten and had fought against her attacker. And the presence of intimate injuries on her body was a clear indication of sexual assault. Dr. Carlos Gordillo also mentioned that there were cuts on her neck, arms, and legs, suggesting that the attacker might have used kitchen knives. After 3 a.m. on Friday, they analyzed Laura's cell phone. Her last contact was with a 28-year-old mechanic named Alfredo Emilio Escobar. He and Laura had been high school classmates, and he enjoyed hunting and fishing, which meant he was skilled with a knife. His house was 2.5 kilometers, 20 blocks, from Laura's home, making it easy for him to visit. The cell tower signals were strong, and on September 13th, Alfredo contacted Laura 4 times. At that time, the cell towers showed they were both at home. Soon after, both phones were active near Laura's house. Laura's phone traveled to the city center and arrived at Alfredo's residence by 5 a.m. Laura's WhatsApp story featured an alien emoji, and her phone was still being tracked. Alfredo was found at his home at 5:52 a.m. After this time, Laura's phone stopped working, and there was no further communication from her. Records show that Alfredo didn't use his cell phone again until 11:05 p.m. the following day. Alfredo returned home at 12:05 p.m. on September 15th, caught by 13 cameras, including city and private surveillance. Investigations on local stores revealed recordings from the early morning of September 13th, showing their physical characteristics resemble Laura and Alfredo. Laura's then mobile phone was moving, and Alfredo was undoubtedly the only suspect in this case. During the investigation, one of the agents recognized Alfredo, recalling a meeting with him a year ago on Highway 22 while traveling to meet family in the towns of Nguyen and Plotier. At that time, a young man had crashed into a patrol car while driving over 80 kilometers per hour. He refused arrest, leading to a lawsuit. Alfredo was about to go to court for that incident, but now he faces more serious charges. At 8:30 a.m. on September 17th, a police patrol was stationed about 30 meters from Alfredo's residence. While on duty, they noticed a young man resembling he driving away from a Fiat Ducato minibus they had been watching. The police identified him by his face shape, facial features, and hairstyle. He entered a house and later left with 2 adults approximately 60 years old. The 3 of them got into a vehicle and headed towards Highway 22 without drawing attention. The police pursued the vehicle until it stopped in a remote area, around 30 meters from a bridge connecting Nguyen and Saletti. The elderly man and Alfredo got out of the vehicle at the same time, and the police asked for their identification. He was with his father and another man, while his mother stayed in the car. It was clear they were trying to leave the city. Alfredo agreed to the identification process but appeared nervous. Soon after, he was taken to the police station and his car was impounded. He underwent a medical examination, which revealed swollen areas on his right knuckles, indicating he had used them to punch. He also had cuts and bruises on the palm of his right hand. Laura's death happened the same day these were found. As a result, Alfredo was charged with raping and murdering Laura. Despite a request to remain silent, he was detained for 6 months over concerns he might escape or obstruct the investigation. On September 1st, a search warrant was executed at the Estrada Street residence where the Alfredo family lived. The property was large, with a construction site and 2 buildings at the back. In Alfredo's sleeping area, officers found fingerprints on the walls. Using luminol to test them revealed blood stains. A blood-stained cloth was also found during the search. The situation escalated when officers went to the building behind the residence and found blood spots on the crumpled vegetation. Blood was also detected on the gates, the right handle of a cart, and at one end of an infrared emitting device. This location was where the fatal blow that killed Laura occurred. The search team collected blood samples for comparison and found that both Laura's and Alfredo's blood were present. The fluid found on Laura's body was examined through DNA analysis. Alfredo's lawyer said the rape charges should not have been brought before the test results were available. However, the results were released shortly. The Ministry of Health Central Laboratory analyzed the samples collected during the investigation. The genetic profiles of both Laura and Alfredo were compared. At the time of his arrest, Alfredo was wearing sneakers, and a knife was found at the bottom of the river. Both were tested. DNA matching Laura's was found on both items. Her genital area was examined using 3 swabs, and Alfredo's DNA matched one of them. This evidence allowed investigators to confirm that he had sexually assaulted Laura. She was killed, dismembered, and her body was disposed of. Law enforcement officials confirmed this during a press conference on September 21st. The prosecutor Juan Austin Garcia believed Alfredo Emilio Escobar was guilty of the crime. He accused Alfredo of killing Laura to cover up the rape and said that if found guilty, Alfredo could be prosecuted and face life in prison. Despite this, more evidence was still needed. DNA analysis technology played an important role in discovering that Alfredo was the suspect. Although he did not plead guilty, the court ordered the seizure of his mobile phone and required him to provide the access code. Despite having Laura as one of his contacts, it was discovered that he had deleted her from the conversation the night she disappeared. He erased Laura's call history, but their social security numbers are still not deleted. Media interviews revealed Alfredo's actions on September 11th, 12th, and 13th. During the investigation, he visited social media platforms to look at photos shared by Laura. Although Alfredo claimed to be innocent, the evidence suggested he was responsible for the murder. Finally, conclusions have been drawn about the incident that took place on the night of the crime. On September 12, 2019, Laura left school around 8 p.m. After spending time with a friend, she mentioned feeling tired and intended to go to sleep. Despite this, Alfredo contacted her at 3:40 a.m. and they began a conversation. Although they were not friends, she agreed to meet him, and then she went to his house. The incident inside the house are unclear, but research shows that Laura avoided any personal contact with Alfredo. In a fit of anger, he sexually assaulted her. Because he was afraid she would denounce him to the authorities, he murdered her. Alfredo led Laura to the backyard, hitting her on the head twice. At that point, she was still alive, but he cruelly hid her body for several hours to avoid getting caught. He also turned off his phone. Laura's body remained in the shed for almost a day, and she died from her injuries. Alfredo used a sharp knife from his kitchen to dismember her body. He then packed the body her parts into his Fiat Ducato minibus and drove 15 kilometers to the area near the breakwaters and left her body there. Afterward, he returned and turned on his phone. Feel relieved that everything has been settled. This case attracted the attention of the whole city. Alfredo's 23-year-old sister made the most headlines when she posted a message on her personal page mentioning both her brother and the victim, Laura. The post received mixed reactions. Some people sympathized with her, while others accused her of being complicit. The younger sister Alfredo's asked Cello and her team to remain vigilant, as her family is involved. Melissa later contacted Alfredo's sister to thank her for the message and asked for clarification. The criminal case was immediately initiated by the prosecution. The initial court hearings were held at the Provincial Legislative Assembly. According to the prosecutor of Nucan, Alfredo was entirely responsible for his actions, and Laura's death was attributed to gender-based violence, in addition to other charges such as rape. In the same hearing, the experts who were involved in analyzing the clothing found in the case, the river, along with the remains and evidence discovered at Alfredo's house, provided their testimony. Florencia, Laura's closest friend, was an unexpected witness. She explained that Alfredo had been messaging Laura for months, inviting her to meet for drinks and socializing. However, they had never met before. Florencia had known Alfredo for 5 years and was aware of his bad reputation. His house frequently hosted parties filled with alcohol and drugs, and intimate acts shared publicly by couples. Florencia had repeatedly advised Laura not to get involved with he, but she consistently ignored. The defense asked why Florencia had not suggested Laura blocking Alfredo's number. Florencia responded that Laura had made that decision and she did not want to interfere in Laura's life. While Florencia was on the stand, a video from security cameras from the day Laura disappeared was shown. In the footage from around 4 a.m., two people can be seen on opposite sides of the screen, heading towards the city center. Florencia admits that it was Laura, stating that her sneakers, jacket, and manner of walking were unmistakable. She also recognized Alfredo. The testimony of Alfredo's friend revealed his impulsiveness when the judge accused him of infidelity. His behavior was characterized by substance abuse and womanizing tendencies. Alfredo's ex-partner, also present in court, stated that their relationship ended badly years ago. She reported him to the authorities because she believed he had stolen from her house and taken money. When she met him to ask for the money back, he chased after the friend who accompanied her. After reviewing the testimonies, Alfredo tried to defend himself. He claimed that his friend, who sold him illegal drugs, was the real culprit. He said that he had been unconscious during the incident that night. He told the local media that he did not commit murder. He explained that he was intoxicated that night, and his friend was also under the influence of drugs at his residence with Laura. When he heard a scream from one of the rooms, Alfredo went to check it out. Seeing blood, he cleaned it up and helped his friend hide the body. In the end, the truth is what truly matters. Despite the lack of evidence, the statement was not confirmed. Alfredo was the only suspect. In his speech, the prosecutor stated that Alfredo took advantage of betraying Laura's trust due to his familiarity with her. He was responsible for the cruelty of his actions and the gruesome method of disposing of the remains. Alfredo Emilio Alfredo was convicted of the rape and murder of 18-year-old Laura Lopez after a jury deliberated for just 40 minutes. This charge is made more serious because it involved an attempt to conceal the attack. The issue of gender violence played a role in the case, leading to him receiving a life sentence without the possibility of release. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Annie Tayan. Annie Tayan was born on May 1, 1965, in Charleston, South Carolina, and was raised by her mother. She had a strong love for life, dancing, fun, and the simple pleasures it brought. Annie dreamed of having a family and considered motherhood her greatest goal. She began this journey very early, giving birth to her first son, Jemia, at the age of 18, followed by her second son, Sean, just a year later. By the age of 20, she welcomed her third child, a daughter named Shane. Unfortunately, shortly after Shane was born, the children's father left Annie, became uninvolved in their lives, and abandoned the family. Annie faced the hardships of raising 3 young children in a rented apartment in Maine. In 1987, when her youngest daughter Shane was only 6 months old, Annie, 22, met Michael Palin, 32, a Navy officer stationed on the aircraft carrier Bramby. Their meeting took place in Portland, Maine, where Michael's ship was docked, and he felt an immediate attraction to Annie during their waterfront encounter. Michael lived in Charleston, South Carolina, and was a respected member of the Navy, known for his work as a computer systems operator. He was actively involved in military operations and had received several awards. Annie was fascinated by Michael's naval career and quickly fell in love with him, telling a friend that she had found a man she felt was truly worthy of her love. After dating for a few months, Annie and Michael decided to move in together, creating a family with 2 sons and a daughter. Unfortunately, their life together took a tragic turn when a fire broke out in their apartment. Annie was away at the time, leaving Michael with the children. Michael, along with Jemia and Sean, were able to escape, but Shane, who was too young to walk, was left behind. When Annie returned, she tried to enter the burning apartment to save Shane, but the neighbors prevented her. The loss of Shane in the fire had a profound effect on Annie. After the devastating fire, Annie and her sons moved to her mother's house in Portland. Meanwhile, Michael focused on his work and decided to stay in the barracks. A few months after the move, a disturbing event occurred near Annie's mother's house. A shed in the backyard was set on fire. The police quickly traced the source of the fire and found a lighter engraved with the name Bramby, the ship on which Michael served. This discovery made Michael the prime suspect in the arson case. However, despite the incriminating evidence, the police were unable to link him to the crime due to insufficient evidence. After the second fire, Maine child welfare authorities discovered that Annie's sons were living in unsafe conditions with her. As a result, they made the decision to remove Jemia and Sean from her custody and place them in the care of the Department of Social Services. This decision devastated Annie, who tried her best to regain custody of her children. But she was unsuccessful and lost custody of her sons. When Michael's ship returned to Charleston, South Carolina, he settled into a rental apartment and reunited with Annie. Despite their complicated past, Annie decided to move in with him in Goose Creek, a suburb of Charleston. However, while there, Annie discovered a photo of Michael wearing a wedding ring, revealing that he was married. When confronted, Michael confessed to Annie that he had been married but was now divorced. He explained that his ex-wife, Dawn Breeze, and their 3 children lived with his mother in Savannah, Georgia. Although Michael assured Annie that he was no longer in a relationship with Dawn, Annie was deeply troubled by this revelation. She considered leaving him but ultimately chose to stay, seeing Michael as a partner with whom to start a family. However, their living situation became negative. Michael became increasingly hostile and disrespectful to Annie. As she considered moving back to her mother's home, she discovered she was pregnant. This unexpected news kept her from leaving and brought her joy as she anticipated the birth of another child. In October 1989, Annie gave birth to her 4th daughter, Jade. Although she knew Jade could never replace her lost daughter, she felt that Jade filled an important void in her heart. In the month after Jade was born, Michael's treatment of Annie worsened. He began publicly insulting and humiliating her. Annie confided to a friend that she feared that if she tried to leave, Michael would relentlessly pursue her. His controlling behavior increased. He locked Annie in their apartment. When he left for work, he would disconnect his phone and take it with him. Annie became increasingly concerned about his actions. Annie, feeling distressed, called her best friend Katie French. During the call, Annie revealed that she was planning to leave Michael. However, Michael threatened that if she left, their daughter Jade would stay with him and Annie would never see her again. Overwhelmed, Annie cried and begged Katie to come immediately to help her and Jade. Unfortunately, Katie was busy and unable to help. Instead, she sent Annie money for a bus ticket, hoping that it would help her escape and return to Portland. This urgent conversation turned out to be their last. 2 days later, on November 7, 1989, Katie tried to contact Annie but received no response. A few days later, Michael informed Katie that Annie had left on November 6, taking her belongings and heading to an unknown destination. Katie expected Annie to contact her from her new home, but after 2 weeks of no news, she grew increasingly worried. By Thanksgiving, November 24, Annie had been out of contact for 20 days. Worried about Annie's safety, Katie tried to contact Annie's friends and acquaintances, but no one had any information about her. When Katie tried to report Annie Tayan, 24, missing to the police, she was told that she could not file a formal report because she was not a family member. As months passed without any updates on Annie, Katie finally contacted Michael's mother. Katie was shocked to learn that Annie's youngest daughter, Jade, was living with Michael's mother. The news confirmed Katie's deepest fears. She was certain that Annie would never willingly leave her daughter behind. Shortly after the disturbing events, Michael Palin moved to the naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. He did not appear to be concerned about her disappearance. Michael did not contact the police or begin a search for Annie. The official search began after Annie's mother reported her missing. Initially, the investigation focused on her husband Michael Palin, who quickly became the prime suspect. Michael explained that on the morning of November 6th, he woke up to find Annie had left, leaving their daughter with him. Michael said that the night before, Annie had mentioned that she wanted to end their relationship. Michael did not look for Annie because he thought their relationship was over and felt no need to contact her any further. He also claimed that he was unaware of Annie's disappearance. After searching the couple's rented apartment, the police found no evidence. Annie Tayan's case seemed to have stalled, with no further search for her. Questions about her current location, whether she was still alive, and the possible motives of any kidnappers remain unanswered. The only known fact is that the last person confirmed to have seen her was her partner, Michael. For 4 long years, there was no news or sign of Annie. Her best friend, Katie French, was the only one actively looking for her. She worked tirelessly on the investigation, and her phone bill alone cost her approximately $16,000. Katie hired a private investigator and was determined to continue the search. She contacted various organizations to gather information about Michael's background. Katie was convinced that Michael was dangerous and untrustworthy. She was terrified of him, knowing that if Michael learned of her ties to the police, it could put her in danger. In 1993, Annie's case was transferred to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, marking a major change in the investigation. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents began a comprehensive review of the case from the beginning. They found Michael Palin, who was staying at Pearl Harbor Naval Base in Hawaii. When Coast Guard agents attempted to speak with him about Annie's disappearance, Michael agreed to speak only if his attorney was present. He then completely stopped cooperating with the investigation and refused to provide any further assistance or information. The Coast Guard agents gathered all available information about Annie's disappearance and contacted the South Carolina Police Department. They asked the department to cross-reference their records with any unidentified bodies, noting that Annie had given birth just a month before her disappearance. South Carolina police then reported a case involving a dead woman who had also given birth a month before her death. They provided a sketch of what the woman looked like, shocking the Coast Guard agents. They believed they had found Annie Tayan. The discovery revealed a brutal murder, with her body found next to a highway in Jasper County, South Carolina, about 100 miles from her home with Michael. The crime scene photos were horrifying. Annie's face was severely crushed, and her skull was broken into 124 pieces, requiring nearly 500 hours of detailed reconstruction. Her body was found in a duffel bag that had been doused with gasoline and set on fire. The burning bag was discovered at 6 a.m. on November 7, 1989, the same time Katie French noticed Annie had stopped answering her calls. Annie was identified by comparing her dental records to those of the unidentified woman. After Annie's body was found, Michael became the prime suspect in her murder. The Coast Guard developed a detailed investigation plan, starting with a review of his financial transactions. They discovered that on the day Annie went missing, Michael had made a credit card purchase about 25 miles south of where her body was found. Additionally, his phone records showed that on the morning of November 6, he called his mother's home in Savannah twice, once at 4:35 a.m. and again at 5:17 a.m. Based on this evidence, police believe that Michael killed Annie in their apartment, then moved her body and left it on the side of the road, where he burned it. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents targeted Michael Palin's ex-wife, Dawn Breeze. At the time of Annie's death, Dawn was still married to Michael and lived in his mother's home in Savannah. After Annie went missing, Dawn divorced Michael and began moving around the state several times, apparently trying to avoid someone or something. Agents eventually tracked her down to Miami, Florida, in the summer of 1995, nearly 6 years after Annie Tain's murder. When they found Dawn, she was making a living through psychic activities. During a visit to her workplace to discuss Annie's disappearance, Dawn responded surprisingly calmly. She asked how long the conversation would last, saying she wanted to eat if it lasted. This response surprised the agents, as they had expected a more emotional response regarding Annie. However, Dawn remained calm throughout their discussion. During the 10-hour interrogation, Dawn's story initially matched Michael's. She said that when she visited Michael's apartment, he told her that his mistress had left and that he planned to raise their daughter on his own. However, Dawn was silent, looked down, and said that she wanted to tell the truth. Her next speech was emotionless and tearless as she shared what she had kept secret for 6 years. Dawn revealed that Michael had called her to his Charleston apartment early one morning. She discovered Annie's body on the living room floor. Michael told Dawn to go into the bedroom to see his daughter. At the time, Dawn and Michael were still legally married and had 3 children together. Michael admitted to Dawn that he had had an affair with Annie, which resulted in the birth of a daughter. He begged her to accept the child and help him raise his daughter. Dawn claimed that rather than face a custody battle with Annie, Michael chose to kill to gain custody. Dawn added, on the night of November 5th and 6th, 1989, Michael and Annie went to bed after having sex. After a while, Annie fell asleep. At this point, Michael violently attacked her with a crowbar. Their daughter, Jade, was lying next to Annie in bed during the horrific incident. Michael continued to beat Annie on the head with increasing brutality. Despite her attempts to fight back, Annie eventually died of her injuries on that same bed. Michael contacted his wife, Dawn, asking her to come immediately. He then placed Annie's body in a large bag and put it in the trunk of his car, where he also had a can of gasoline. He drove with Dawn and their daughter Jade in the back seat for about 100 miles. When they reached a quiet area on the side of the road, Michael took Annie's body out of the trunk, doused it with gasoline, and set it on fire. After making sure the fire was burning well, he quickly returned to the car and drove Dawn and Jade back to his mother's house in Savannah. Dawn's revelation was crucial evidence in the investigation. The police asked Dawn to make a recorded phone call to Michael to talk about Annie's murder. Dawn agreed and called Michael, expressing her concern about the discovery and identification of Annie's body. Michael's response was, no, they didn't. During the call, Dawn told Michael that blood had been found in their old apartment and that Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents suspected they were involved in a murder. She encouraged Michael to come up with an explanation for the blood. Michael responded, okay, we need to work together and come up with a solution. Although he did not admit anything directly, his demeanor showed that he understood the seriousness of the situation. At the end of the conversation, Michael warned Dawn to be careful with her phone calls and assured her that they would work together to resolve the situation. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents took Dawn to the crime scene to search for any remaining evidence. To protect her identity and ensure her safety as a cooperating witness, they disguised her before arriving at the apartment. Dawn carefully described and demonstrated where Annie's body was and the sequence of events. She pointed out a spot near the wall and baseboard where a significant amount of blood had seeped into the carpet and concrete floor below. Since Michael had moved out, the landlord had replaced and cleaned the carpet several times, which explained the lack of visible evidence. However, when the police used a special chemical on the concrete floor, a large purple stain appeared, indicating the presence of protein and confirming Dawn's account of where Annie's body had been. Despite the blood on the concrete, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents had difficulty confirming that the substance was blood, so they continued to search for more physical evidence. Dawn pointed to a nightstand containing a television next to the bed where Annie had been killed. She noted that blood had splattered on the television during the murder, and Michael had said that it needed a thorough cleaning. He had then disposed of the television, possibly selling it rather than throwing away a working appliance, given his frugal habits. Finding the television was difficult, but the agents were determined to find it. At this point, Michael Palin realized that the Naval Criminal Investigative Service was watching him, especially after a phone call with his ex-wife, Dawn. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents were concerned that Michael might flee, or that he might threaten witnesses, harm them. On October 11, 1995, Michael attempted to escape, but was quickly apprehended and taken into custody by police. While Michael Palin was in police custody on suspicion of murder, Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents worked tirelessly to find and interview all the residents of the apartment complex where the murders took place in November 1989. Their efforts were rewarded when they spoke with a neighbor who said he had purchased a television from Michael. Amazingly, the television was still working and in the neighbor's home. The police quickly confiscated the television and sent it to the FBI lab for forensic analysis. This investigation led to a crucial discovery. Analysis found 11 blood stains inside the speaker. These blood samples were later compared to Annie's DNA, providing crucial evidence in the murder case. At this point in the case, Michael's attorney announced that he was willing to plead guilty, but only if the death penalty was removed from consideration. The prosecutor was not pleased with this development, but military law required such a plea bargain to be negotiated at trial. Michael admitted his guilt, recounting the details of his crimes objectively, his account showing no signs of remorse or empathy. As a result, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. He was also dishonorably discharged from the Navy. Dawn Breeze, who knew about her husband's crimes and remained silent for more than 6 years, escaped legal consequences thanks to her crucial confession to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, which greatly aided the investigation. Annie's children now know the truth about their mother's tragic fate and understand that she did not abandon them. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Deborah Newell. Deborah Newell was a highly successful and affluent woman who had built her fortune through hard work and dedication in the interior design industry. After years of climbing the ranks, she founded her own design firm, Ambrosia, where she spent 3 decades pursuing her passion. Regardless her professional success, her personal life was a different story. She had been married 4 times, but each union ended in divorce. While she was a devoted mother to her 4 children, but her with an intense desire for a happier home life. A few years ago, her family experienced a tragedy. Her sister, Cindy, was brutally murdered by her husband, Billy Vickers, in March 1984. What's more heartbreaking is that their mother testified against Cindy and supported Billy throughout the trial. As a result, Billy spent only a few years in prison for his heinous crime. Deborah was deeply affected by the tragedy, leaving her with anxiety and lingering fear of guns. Despite being encouraged by friends to purchase a pistol for protection, she was unable to bear the thought of having a gun near her, and she lived alone for a long time. Deborah prioritized her physical appearance and lifestyle. She invested significant time and money in skin care, makeup, and hair, and surrounded herself with luxurious items from brands like Chanel, Cartier, Denam, and Gucci. Despite her beautiful life, Deborah felt incomplete without a loving partner. John Meehan was born on February 3, 1958, in California. He grew up with his sisters, Karen and Donna. John's life was influenced by his father, who taught him dishonest ways. This led John to get involved in scams, deal with illegal substances, and often have run-ins with the law, ultimately forcing him to leave California in 1988. After completing his undergraduate studies at Arizona State University with a Bachelor of Arts degree, John went on to join the law faculty at the University of Dayton. His striking looks, 6 feet and 3 inches, with hazel green eyes and dark hair, earned him the nickname Dirty John from his friends. He possessed a natural charm that effortlessly attracted women. After John finished his academic journey, he met Tanya Sells, a nurse anesthetist, and they got married in November 1990. Tanya was 25 years old, and John was 31. However, their relationship was built on lies, and John kept his family away from Tanya, telling her they were bad people. Tanya supported John's education as an anesthesiologist while attending medical school in Tennessee. She also helped him get his license to practice anesthesiology. The couple had 2 children, but their marriage began to fall apart over time. Tanya eventually discovered the truth about John's past from his mother and sisters. She also found out that John had been stealing pills from his patients and was addicted to them, which explained his cause of his short temper. Tanya immediately reported John to the police. After an investigation, John admitted his wrongdoing, but instead of surrendering, he left the state and went into hiding at a hotel in Michigan. However, the police found John easily and discovered him unconscious in his hotel room, surrounded by empty pill containers. An ambulance was called, but on the way to the hospital, John woke up, grabbed a medication, and jumped out of the ambulance. He was caught again and eventually sentenced to 6 years in prison in Michigan for resisting arrest and possessing illegal drugs. John spent just 17 months in prison. Then, his sentence was reduced and he was released in 2004. During this time, he met Deborah through online dating. John, then 55, and Deborah, then 59, had both decided to give online dating a try. Deborah was immediately drawn to John's profile, which pretended he was a divorced doctor and a Christian looking for love. Despite having a string of unsuccessful dates, Deborah was delighted to meet John in person. He showed genuine interest in her life and accomplishments, which made her feel appreciated. This was a refreshing change for Deborah, who had been disappointed by her previous dating experiences. John and Deborah's first date took place at a restaurant in Irvine, California, in October 2014. John's aim was to make a great impression on Deborah, which he achieved by sharing false stories about his past. He told her that he had worked with Doctors Without Borders in Iraq, had 2 children, and owned multiple properties. Deborah was captivated by the image of a selfless doctor who had dedicated his life to helping others. John treated Deborah with kindness and respect, making her feel like a queen. This was exactly what Deborah had been longing for, genuine affection. John's charming words left Deborah smitten, and she invited him to her penthouse after dinner. However, John crossed the line this time. After a few kisses, he tried to get intimate with Deborah, but she didn't feel comfortable, so she asked him to leave. The next morning, John apologized profusely, attributing his behavior to too much alcohol and an inability to control his emotions. This admission won back Deborah's trust, and their relationship continued to blossom. As their love progresses, Deborah and John spent more time together. On their 3rd date, he expressed his love for Deborah and proposed to her. She was thrilled with their connection and chose to overlook some red flags. One notable instance was when John wore worn and somewhat unclean medical scrubs to a charity event hosted by Deborah, claiming he hadn't had time to change. Despite this, Deborah proudly introduced him to her friends as her doctor, and they took photos together. Their connection deepened, and they eventually decided to move in together. Deborah's daughter Jason lived with her in the penthouse. Jason was unhappy with the men her mother was dating, and in particular, she had concerns about John. Jason found it unusual that her mother, who had impeccable taste and favored designer brands like Gucci, was in a relationship with someone who wore dirty, unkempt clothing. Jason noticed him showing curiosity about the artwork in her mother's apartment, almost as if he was determining its value. After only meeting for 5 weeks, John convinced Deborah that they should live separately, and they rented a house on Balboa Island's waterfront for $6,500 per month. Deborah paid $80,000 up front to cover several months of rent. However, John opted not to put his name on the lease, citing tax complications as the reason. Deborah was deeply smitten with John and took care of all the expenses, covering everything herself. Unbeknownst to her children, she couldn't understand why they didn't approve of he. John shows Deborah concern for her by making her coffee every morning, helping her with shopping, and generally making her life simpler. Deborah believed that she had finally found her ideal partner and was hopeful that her children would accept him. She envisioned a future where they all came together as a harmonious family. Then, Deborah intended to introduce John to her younger daughter, Tara, who was known for being more laid-back and easygoing compared to Jason. Tara visited her mother, Deborah, and John on the day they moved into their new home. Upon meeting he for the first time, Tara felt uneasy due to his unfriendly behavior and lack of enthusiasm for the move. Despite Tara's initial doubts, she decided to give him a chance. However, her worries about John increased due to some suspicious signs. For example, John claimed to own homes in Newport Beach and Palm Springs, but he never discussed them going there to visit or moving there. He also didn't own a car. What's more, he spent most of his days at home, often playing video games. Just before Thanksgiving, Tara decided to secretly go through John's belongings and stumbled upon a nurse's certificate with his name on it. Realizing that John is not the doctor he said he was, Tara confronted him about this. This led to a huge outburst from John, who became angry and began yelling at Tara for trying to ruin her mother's happiness. He insists that Tara will fail to separate them. Deborah just stood there, listening, and eventually, a big argument broke out and ended with Tara leaving the house. John took advantage of the situation to manipulate Deborah into believing that her children were only interested in her wealth and were waiting for her to pass away, thus they not wanting her to be happy. On the eve of Thanksgiving, Deborah's extremely religious mother, Arlene, visited. However, John's attempt to present himself as a religious man in front of Arlene backfires and leads to more arguments. Following this incident, Deborah sought the advice of a psychotherapist. They have advised her to set boundaries with her children and strive for a peaceful life, advice that she chose to follow. Deborah and John moved to Balboa Island, where they enjoyed dining at local restaurants and taking leisurely strolls while admiring the beautiful scenery. Although Deborah was incredibly happy, but she was still worried about John's choice of outfit. His wardrobe consisted mainly of old medical scrubs, loose-fitting and frayed pants, and worn-out shirts. Deborah, on the other hand, wanted he to dress fashionably and complement her lifestyle. He attributed his lack of finer clothes to having them stolen during his time in Iraq. To address this issue, she took John shopping and bought him a complete set of high-end designer outfits. In early December, John went with Deborah on a work-related trip to Las Vegas, where they made the sudden decision to get married after knowing each other for less than 2 months. Deborah chose not to tell her children about this development. Around that time, a mysterious woman managed to get into John and Deborah's home. He used this incident to convince Deborah that they needed better security. He then set up several surveillance cameras around the house that he could control with his smartphone. He even put cameras in Deborah's office, where he could keep an eye on her activities. John's goal was to have complete control over Deborah. As time went on, Deborah started asking John about his family and life before they met. Every time she asked, he came up with a quick excuse or justification, even though his answers didn't quite add up. Deborah dismissed her doubts, thinking she had found the perfect partner. However, her children, especially Jason, were still wary of John. Since he didn't own a car, John used Deborah's, which led Tara and Jacelyn to investigate his activities. They installed a tracking device on John's car to monitor his movements. When this yielded no results, they decided to hire a private investigator to investigate further. The investigators' findings were shocking. John had filed for bankruptcy, held a nursing license but not a medical license, and had lived in multiple states, including Arizona, Ohio, Indiana, Tennessee, and California. Furthermore, he had been in the Orange County Jail. When Tara and Jason shared these things with their mother, Deborah, she remained unwavering, stating that her love for John would not change, even if the things were true. In late March, Deborah received a letter meant for John. The letter was from a former prison inmate, but before she could read it, he hastily took it from her. Initially, he was very angry, accusing her of not trusting him. He later claimed that the letter was from a friend he was providing emotional support to. Deborah was uneasy about John's explanation, and her concerns grew. The day after discovering lies, when John's left for work, and she decided to search through his belongings. This search revealed shocking truths about him. She found out that he was a former nurse anesthetist who had become addicted to pain medication, which led to his arrest and the downfall of his career. What's more disturbing is that Deborah discovers that he is a scammer and has been stealing from women he meets online. As Deborah searched further, she found court records showing that John had a search warrant issued for his storage unit. When authorities searched the unit, they found a handgun, bullets, a GPS tracker, syringes, and other suspicious items. This information was alarming. But what caught Deborah's attention was that he had multiple restraining orders against him from different women. The most unsettling fact, however, was that John had been released from prison on October 8th and had met Deborah just days later. Too overwhelmed by these facts, Deborah felt a mix of shock and fear. She realized that John was a violent felon who posed a big threat to her and her children. Despite the danger, Deborah decided to calm and waited for the right moment to take action. When John left for the hospital due to back problems, Deborah seized the opportunity. With her family's help, she quickly moved out of the house while he was away. During the process of packing John's belongings, Deborah discovered some disturbing documents, online comments from other women warning about John's manipulative nature. These comments described him as a skilled deceiver who used his charm and good looks to manipulate others. Convinced that John was unstable, Deborah decided to end their relationship and leave. However, John continued to message her, apologizing and asking her to visit him in the hospital. Feeling guilty, she eventually gave in to his requests. By June 2015, he had managed to persuade Deborah to reconcile with him. He offers a defense about the objects she found and confesses to hiding his past, believing she wouldn't care about it if he were honest. He admitted to lying about being a doctor to impress her and now begged for her help to turn his life around. Deborah decided to give her husband another chance and they moved to a new apartment in Irvine. However, her children were unhappy about the decision and did not want to see her. As a result, Deborah and John temporarily kept a distance from the children. In March 2016, Deborah had been trying to help John overcome his addiction for over a year, during which they had been married. Unfortunately, Deborah's entire family, particularly her daughter Jason, disliked John, and he doesn't like Jason either. The tension between them had grown so severe that John prohibited Deborah from seeing Jason. To make matters worse, John contacted Jason's real estate school, slandering her in front of the teachers. He also sent Jason threatening and vulgar messages, telling her that her mother didn't want anything to do with her. Although he appears to be recovering from rehab, the more cruel and aggressive he became. By April 2016, Deborah finally reached the limit of her tolerance. She wanted to end her relationship peacefully, so she started withdrawing money from her bank account to protect it. $30,000 was hidden in a lower drawer in her home. When John discovered the money, he claimed it belonged to him. And his behavior became increasingly aggressive as he had to accept the fact that their marriage would end in divorce. Realizing she needed to escape, Deborah took some personal items and moved to her friend Jacqueline's apartment in Irvine, which had a secure complex with multiple surveillance cameras. She attempted to obtain a restraining order but was denied by an Orange County judge. John lived in another state and was doing no harm, so all she could do was end the relationship and try to move on. After they separated, John moved to one of Deborah's house in Nevada. Despite her ignoring his calls, he persisted in contacting her. On June 11, 2016, John made another move, aimed at getting Deborah's attention. That day, Deborah drove her Jaguar to work and parked it in the office parking lot. During her work hours, the car was stolen. It was later found about a block and a half away, drenched in gasoline. The car had not been set on fire, it sustained minor damage. Security footage clearly identified John as the perpetrator of the theft. On the evening of August 20, 2016, Tara returned home from work and parked her car in the lot. As she stepped out of the vehicle, she was suddenly confronted by John, who approached her with a knife. He attempted to drag her back into the car, but Tara resisted and screamed for help. In the ensuing struggle, John tried to cover her mouth. But she managed to bite him. Tara, wearing heavy boots, used her leverage to kick John and knock the knife out of his hand. Seizing the opportunity, she picked up the knife and stabbed John multiple times, inflicting a total of 13 wounds. Her final strike was particularly severe, as it pierced his eye. A neighbor witnessed the struggle and rushed to Tara's aid, providing her with a towel to treat her injuries and calling the police. Despite his severe injuries, John was still alive when the paramedics arrived. A search of his car revealed evidence of his sinister intentions, including duct tape, cable ties, kitchen knives, and a passport, suggesting that he had planned to abduct Tara and escape the city with her as a hostage. John was hospitalized for 4 days to receive critical care, but unfortunately, his injuries were fatal, and he passed away at the age of 57. After his death, his body was cremated, and a memorial service was not held. Deborah and her children were severely affected by this. It took a while for Deborah to readjust to her normal life, but the memory still haunts her. She struggles with feelings of guilt for introducing a criminal into her family's life. As a result, Deborah has become extremely vigilant about her safety, carrying a stun gun and pepper spray with her at all times. She has vowed never to meet anyone online again. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lisa Holm. Lisa Holm was born on February 7, 1998 in a small town in Sweden. It is a peaceful place where she lives with her parents and older sister. Lisa is a kind, positive, and determined person. Even before finishing her studies, she decided that she wanted to go to Australia to study architecture. Lisa has also had a lot of experience traveling with her family, visiting many other countries. In the summer of 2015, when Lisa turned 17, she finally found her first job at a cafe about a 40-minute drive from home. During the first few weeks, her parents still drove her to work. However, not long after, her father decided to buy her a scooter so that she could get around on her own. Lisa had this type of driver's license before she turned 18, which is the age required to apply for a car driver's license. She was very happy to receive this gift because it was an opportunity for her to go to work by herself without having to rely on others. However, in the first few weeks, her father still accompanied her by car because Lisa lacked experience driving on the road. She only worked on weekends, and her father accompanied her every morning and evening. This habit continued until June 7th, when he finally allowed her to drive herself to the cafe. Around lunchtime, her parents decided to visit her at work and have lunch together. That day, the cafe was quite crowded, so Lisa was very busy with work. She took a short break to have lunch with her parents, then they returned home. At 6:23 p.m., Lisa sent a text message to her father saying that she was coming home. Just 3 minutes later, her father received a call from Lisa, but no one answered. He heard some voices in the background and thought that Lisa had accidentally called his number while talking to her colleague. He also heard the sound of a car door closing. He called Lisa's name several times, but no one answered. Then, he ended the call and started waiting for her to come home. However, she did not appear. After an hour, Lisa's parents began to worry. They thought something might have happened to her on the way since she should have arrived by now. This was the first time she had ridden a scooter alone, and her father was very concerned about her safety. He tried calling her several times, but Lisa's phone was turned off. After waiting for a while, her father decided to set off, hoping to meet Lisa on the way because she could have taken the shortest route. Her father was afraid that Lisa might have had an accident, so he drove carefully, paying attention to the road but did not see his daughter. Finally, he went to the cafe but could not find Lisa. When he arrived at her workplace, he noticed that Lisa's scooter was parked in front of the building. At that moment, he panicked because he could not find his daughter despite having come all this way. When he saw her scooter, he immediately calmed down, thinking that maybe she was just late for work for some reason. However, there was no one in the cafe, and he noticed something else. Lisa's scooter key was still in the ignition, with a helmet dangling from the handle. These things made him believe that something was wrong with his daughter. She would never leave the key in the scooter while leaving it unattended in the parking lot. Meanwhile, Lisa's mother contacted the cafe owner, hoping to find clues about her daughter's whereabouts. However, the cafe owner claimed that he did not know where Lisa was. According to the cafe owner, Lisa had called the staff around 6 p.m. and they told her that they were closing the cafe. After the call from Lisa's mother, the cafe owner immediately got in his car and went to the cafe. On the way, the cafe owner also contacted 4 friends who lived nearby, asking them to help find Lisa. When the cafe owner arrived, they began searching both the cafe and the surrounding area. They hoped that Lisa might have decided to take the bus instead of the scooter. Lisa's mother and sister drove to the bus station in their town to check the schedule. Unfortunately, Lisa was not on the bus. Her family immediately contacted the police. It was dark. The police quickly expanded the search. The fact that Lisa's motorbike was left in the parking lot with the keys made them consider the possibility that Lisa had been kidnapped. Such incidents are quite rare in Sweden, especially in the remote rural area where she lived. Therefore, the police quickly mobilized teams with sniffer dogs, while other officers began knocking on doors near the cafe. When Lisa's classmates and friends learned about her missing, they shared information about the case on social media, hoping to attract more attention and find witnesses. The search went on all night but yielded no results. On Monday morning, the police department announced Lisa's missing to the public and asked anyone with information to come forward. At the same time, a man working in a warehouse across the street from the cafe found a motorcycle glove on the floor and reported it to the police. Detectives had checked the warehouse the night Lisa went missing but did not find the glove. They later showed the glove to Lisa's parents, who confirmed that it belonged to their daughter. This further strengthened the theory that Lisa had been kidnapped, and the police intensified their search efforts. By that time, news of Lisa's missing had captured the nation's attention, and hundreds of volunteers had joined the search. On Tuesday, the police received some alarming new leads. Volunteers searched the area around a dirt road a few hundred yards from the cafe. During the investigation of the crime scene, investigators collected several pieces of evidence related to Lisa, including a phone case, a receipt, a ticket, and a broken smartphone screen. They later found other parts of the smartphone, Lisa's ID card, and several other receipts scattered along the dirt road. This evidence made the police almost certain that Lisa had been kidnapped. They mobilized every available resource for the search, and the number of participants grew. The case became a major news topic in Sweden, and hundreds of volunteers from across the country joined the search. A local missing persons organization also joined the effort. The scale of the search for Lisa became the largest in the country's modern history, with more than 1,000 people involved in total. The police received numerous calls from people with information about Lisa's missing. One woman reported that before Lisa went missing, she had gone jogging. While she was jogging, a man standing next to his car stopped her and asked for directions to a city she had never heard of. He spoke to her in English. She tried to give him directions using Google Maps, but he asked her to get in his car and show him the way using his navigation device. The woman found this request suspicious, so she refused and continued walking. She also told the police that she believed she had seen the man among the workers repairing a warehouse across from the cafe. Lisa's co-workers shared a testimony with the police. On the day of her missing, a witness noticed two men standing across from the coffee shop, looking in the direction of where she worked. The witness didn't think much of it at the time, but after Lisa went missing, they decided to share it with the police. The next day, Wednesday, Lisa's father and some friends searched the dirt road where her belongings had been found the day before. When they went a little further, they found Lisa's driver's license and house keys. This suggested that Lisa may have been abducted and forced to leave the coffee shop via this road. Her kidnapper may have thrown her belongings out of the car or other vehicle they used to abduct her. Police and volunteers focused their efforts in this area, but no other items were found. That evening, a friend of Lisa's father was returning home from his search. As he passed the coffee shop, he noticed that the police had left the warehouse where Lisa's gloves were found. The man decided to go inside the coffee shop to look for any other clues. This time, he used his car's flashlight to walk around the premises since it was dark. While there, he noticed a shiny object lying on the floor. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was a pair of women's earrings. The man later reported this to the police, who showed the earrings to Lisa's parents. They confirmed that the jewelry belonged to their daughter. The police then sealed off the shed and conducted a more thorough inspection. The lead detective explained that on the first day of the search for Lisa, the priority was to find her, so the shed had not been fully inspected, and they may have missed small items such as earrings. After conducting an in-depth investigation, forensic experts and sniffer dogs were called in. They discovered a remarkable piece of evidence hidden behind a wall, which was traces of human feces. Although it seemed unrelated to the case, forensic experts developed an hypothesis regarding it. When criminals commit serious and horrifying crimes, their bodies secrete a large amount of adrenaline, which can lead them to be unable to control their urge to urinate. This often happens to murderers, who frequently urinate before or during the crime. Based on the discovery of Lisa's gloves and earrings in the warehouse area, the police hypothesized that if she had been kidnapped, the perpetrator might have dragged her into this building. Therefore, detectives did not rule out the possibility that the kidnapper may have consumed a large amount of adrenaline, leading to an inability to control himself and necessitating urination at the scene. Consequently, fecal samples were taken and sent for DNA analysis. On Friday, the search area was expanded, and volunteers went to a farm about 3.2 kilometers from the cafe. This farm complex consisted of large buildings where many people worked. The search team decided to check the entire area. However, after they arrived, two men appeared at the farm. They spoke no Swedish and only communicated in English. One of them claimed that the police had come to the farm to check on them. But the leader of the search party did not believe him, as he thought he would be notified if it were true. So he decided to continue searching. The two men walked around the farm, observing for a while before driving away. After about an hour, the search team discovered a pile of branches behind the cowshed. Upon closer inspection, they found a motorcycle helmet, jacket, and headphones. Police quickly arrived on the scene and confirmed that these items belonged to Lisa. They then sent forensic experts to the farm to conduct a more thorough investigation. The detectives heard stories about two strange men who tried to stop volunteers from checking the farm. The police also recalled a report about a woman who had encountered a man acting suspiciously while jogging and who spoke English. In fact, they had some idea of his identity from the very beginning of the search. They visited the houses surrounding the cafe. In one of the houses, two Lithuanian brothers lived with the wife of one of them. All three of them spoke no Swedish and communicated only in English. They were the only people within a few miles who did not speak the local language. The police also had other indirect reasons to suspect them. The brothers worked at the warehouse across the street from the cafe and at the farm where Lisa's helmet was found. They were familiar with these locations and the road leading to their house. Since there were no other suspects, the police decided to question all three of them. Forensic experts, along with volunteers, went to the farm to continue the investigation. They noticed an old trailer, surrounded by tall grass, that looked like it hadn't been used in years. However, the grass around the door was flattened, indicating that something had been there recently. In addition, the grass under the door was also matted down, indicating that the door had not been opened for a long time. When the forensic experts opened the door, they were immediately hit by a strong stench of decay. Inside the trailer were several wardrobes, most of which had previously been used as changing rooms for workers. All but one were locked, leading experts to suspect that Lisa's body might be in one of them. They began opening each one and eventually discovered Lisa's body in an open cupboard, hidden behind a pile of old clothes and rags. Despite the small size of the cupboard, the perpetrator had managed to squeeze the victim inside. Lisa had been tied up with a rope around her neck and duct tape wrapped around her head. Her pants had been pulled down, and her shirt had been pulled up. Medical experts determined that Lisa had died from strangulation, but no signs of sexual assault were found. All of her clothes were turned over to the lab for testing. As news of the discovery of her body spread rapidly across the country, headlines in Sweden focused on Lisa's abduction. When her body was found and the public learned of her brutal murder, the incident shocked the entire nation. Since such crimes are extremely rare in Sweden, everyone was taken aback that someone could commit such a brutal act. On the same day her body was discovered, something unusual and quite strange happened. A YouTube user came across a video posted 13 days before the murder, titled 13, which had a countdown timer. The most disturbing detail was that the name of the channel that posted the video was Lisa. News of this video quickly spread across the media, leaving many people stunned by the coincidence. Some began to speculate that someone had predicted the murder, but the truth was much simpler. Someone had likely changed the channel name and video title after discovering Lisa's body. This could have been to suggest another conspiracy theory or just a cruel joke. The police are trying their best to quickly find the culprit in this murder. When Lisa's body was discovered, investigators brought in the owners of the farm, Neregis Belavicius, his brother and his brother's wife, for questioning. However, all of them denied any involvement in the case. They claimed that at the time of the kidnapping, they were at home together to provide each other with an alibi. According to their story, Neregis was sleeping in his room while his wife was preparing dinner and Neregis' brother was on the computer. Around 8 p.m., Neregis woke up and went to the gas station to buy pizza and cigarettes. The police had some doubts about the testimony of them, as they might have been protecting each other. Although the police collected their DNA samples, investigators still did not find direct evidence linking them to the murder case. Forensic experts worked diligently at relevant locations, such as the barn and the farm, using all available resources and manpower, and their efforts finally paid off. In the barn area, there was a small room resembling an office, with a large window overlooking the cafe. When examining this room, experts discovered 15 different male semen stains on the wall and floor near the window. This suggested that someone had stood there, observing the cafe staff, including Lisa. The collected semen samples were promptly sent to the laboratory, where experts extracted DNA profiles from these samples. The results of the DNA analysis showed that all 15 semen traces matched the DNA of Neregis. Additionally, fecal samples found in the barn also matched his DNA. In the adjacent room, which had previously been used to store cow's milk, forensic experts found a pipe about 2 feet above the floor, covered in a thick layer of dust except for a small strip. The size of the strip matched the rope used to strangle Lisa. Blood was found on the pipe, and DNA analysis confirmed that the blood belonged to Neregis. On the floor near the pipe, they also found a piece of rope that matched the one on the pipe. Experts conducted tests and identified 2 DNA samples, Lisa's and Neregis's. This was an important step in the police investigation. They had connected the suspect to the rope used to kill the victim. Additionally, a strand of Lisa's hair was found in the room. Another crucial piece of evidence was Neregis's DNA found on her jacket. Based on this evidence, the police believed that Lisa had been murdered there. Police pieced together a similar sequence of events. Neregis had been observing the cafe for some time, and when Lisa was alone in the parking lot, he approached her. Based on the jogger's account, he may have pretended to ask Lisa for directions to a certain city or used some other tactic to trick her. Neregis may have then lured Lisa into his car to enter a route into the GPS system. Since Lisa was a kind person who always tried to help others, she may have agreed. Once she was in the car, the perpetrator covered her mouth and drove to a secluded place. At the scene, the perpetrator tied a rope around the victim's neck and hung her from a pipe. According to doctors, this action may have excited the perpetrator so much that he experienced an adrenaline rush, causing him to defecate on the spot. After the victim died, he placed Lisa's body in his car and drove to the farm, throwing her belongings out the window on the way. He hid the victim's body in the trailer's storage locker and covered it with old clothes. The entire process took less than an hour. Despite the overwhelming evidence, he maintained his innocence. His wife and brother were not involved and were released. They quickly left Sweden and returned to Lithuania. Preparations for the trial were intense. Neregis claimed that he had worked in that warehouse for a long time, so his DNA could have been present due to his work. Additionally, he had alibis from his wife and brother, although there were doubts about the reliability of both sources in court. This could work in his favor, although many uncertainties remained. However, the presence of Neregis's DNA on the victim's clothes could only be explained by his direct contact with her on the day of the murder. Furthermore, the police also found a witness who saw Neregis's car near the cafe just before and after Lisa's abduction. according to the witness. The car had traveled several times on the road between the cafe and the farm at a time when Narigis was believed to be asleep at home, according to his brother and his wife. After months of investigation, experts used the most advanced equipment to examine all the collected evidence. They found traces of Narigis's DNA on most of Lisa's clothing, including inside her underwear. With public interest piqued, the investigators continued to search for more clues that could influence the proceedings and strengthen Narigis's connection to the case. They traveled to Lithuania to speak with his wife and his brother again. The woman maintained that he had not left the house between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m., but when his brother was questioned, the detectives quickly obtained the information they wanted. After presenting the man with all the evidence against his brother and the details of what he had done to the 17-year-old girl, the man decided to cooperate with the police. He claimed that Narigis was not home that night, returning only around 7:30 p.m. He looked dirty and immediately washed all his clothes. As the police began questioning all the residents and visiting their homes, Narigis whispered to his brother to tell the police that he had been home during that time. Narigis later explained that he was afraid of being charged with a crime he did not commit, as he was an immigrant and had no alibi at the time of the abduction. The brother truly believed his cousin was innocent, but after hearing all the evidence, he realized that his initial thoughts might have been incorrect. Lisa's funeral took place just a month after her murder. The church where the funeral was held could only accommodate 130 people, but many more came to say goodbye to her. The organizers decided to set up extra chairs and screens outside so that everyone could watch the ceremony. The trial began 4 months after the murder and once again attracted national attention, placing everyone involved under a great deal of pressure. Narigis's lawyer claimed that his client's DNA could have been found on the victim's clothes because he had worked in the barn. However, the prosecutor argued that this explanation did not make sense, especially concerning Lisa's underwear. The only way the suspect's DNA could have ended up there would be if he had touched the victim's underwear. The lawyer was unable to produce any concrete evidence to prove his client's innocence. Instead, he theorized that the real killer was Narigis's brother. According to this theory, the brother took multiple samples of Narigis's DNA and deliberately left them on the victim's body and at the crime scene to confuse the case. But this defense was quickly dismissed. The trial lasted a month, and Narigis was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in a high-security prison. Although in Sweden, this prison offers the same amenities as a 3-star hotel. The lawyer appealed but was rejected. In early 2017, Narigis himself applied to be transferred to a prison in his home country of Lithuania for reasons that remain unclear. Lithuanian prisons are significantly worse than those in Sweden. Yet the court still accepted the defendant's request. After all, providing comfortable conditions of detention cost Swedish taxpayers hundreds of dollars per day per prisoner. That same year, Narigis appealed to the Lithuanian court, and his sentence was reduced from life to 15 years. However, his joy was short-lived. A few weeks later, the court overturned the decision, and Narigis was once again sentenced to life in prison, with no chance of returning to a comfortable cell in Sweden. 5 years later, in August 2022, Narigis was transferred to a prison in Lithuania. While other prisoners were being moved to another ward, one of them attacked and seriously injured Narigis, leading to his death on the way to the hospital. As for the suspect's wife, her involvement in the case has not been completely ruled out. The police stressed that it was almost impossible for her to be directly involved in the kidnapping or murder. If that were the case, experts would have found her DNA on the victim's clothes or belongings. However, it cannot be ruled out that she knew about Narigis's crime and tried to help him escape punishment by providing a false alibi. Narigis's brother also raised questions. Cafe employees reported seeing 2 men standing near the barn and watching them. Assuming that one of them was Narigis himself, the other man could have been his brother. However, the man's DNA was not found in the barn or on Lisa's clothes, making it unlikely that he was involved in the murder. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Brooke Schuyler Richardson. Carroll, Ohio, is home to several families, including the Richardson family. This family consists of Kim and Scott Richardson, who are very involved in their children's lives. Their son, Jackson, loves playing football, while their daughter, Brooke Schuyler, commonly known as Skylar, is a cheerleader. Skylar has struggled with an eating disorder since she was very young. Her mother, Kim, first noticed the problem when Skylar was in 6th grade at the age of 12. Skylar's hyperfocus on food and exercise became very apparent when she refused to buy gum because it had more than 5 calories. As a cheerleader, Skylar needs to be light and easy to throw. The pressure to maintain a certain weight makes her battle with weight loss even more difficult. She is constantly preoccupied with her body image and is afraid of gaining weight. Skylar's struggle with her weight and body image began during cheerleading practice. In an effort to maintain her weight, she started vomiting after meals. However, this behavior only worsened her problems once practice ended. After that, Skylar's struggle with her weight became more intense. She may experience periods of overeating in a short time, consuming more than her body needs. This is often accompanied by periods of starvation, during which Skylar restricts her food intake or follows a strict diet. Skylar's parents noticed changes in her behavior and became concerned about her health. They tried to express these concerns to her, but whenever the subject was brought up, Skylar became quiet. She did not want to talk about it and always refused any attempts to address her weight changes. Skylar's parents sought help from various professionals, including doctors and therapists, hoping that these interventions would help their daughter reduce her anxiety. After a clinical evaluation, Skylar was diagnosed with body dysmorphic disorder. This psychological condition causes individuals to focus excessively on a perceived flaw in their appearance, leading to impairment in daily functioning and distress. In July 2016, during her senior year of high school, Skylar began dating a friend's cousin. However, the relationship did not last, and by January 2017, Skylar had a new boyfriend, a high school student named Brandon. Skylar was in a good mood and appeared to have gained weight. Her parents, Kim and Scott, believed that their daughter's eating disorder had improved. They noticed that she looked healthy and genuinely happy. In February, Skylar chose a tight-fitting evening gown that required a tie. In mid-March, she went on vacation with her family. During the trip, she wore a two-piece swimsuit, and her mother commented that she looked great. Kim believed that her daughter and Brandon were having sex, so she wanted Skylar to start taking birth control pills. She thought this would protect her daughter's health and prevent the risk of an unwanted pregnancy. In mid-April 2017, Skylar went to her mother's gynecologist to get a prescription for birth control pills while her mother, Kim, waited outside the clinic. After seeing the doctor, Skylar left the clinic with tears in her eyes. Kim immediately asked her daughter why she was so sad, and Skylar replied that it was a painful experience for her. Kim believed her daughter was telling the truth, unaware of the real reason behind the tears. During Skylar's visit to her OB/GYN, the doctor informed her that she was about 8 months pregnant. Skylar asked the doctor not to reveal this information to anyone, as she was not ready to share the news with her family. On May 5th, 9 days later, Skylar and her boyfriend Brandon went to prom. Even though Skylar was in the final stages of her pregnancy, she still managed to fit into her prom dress. 2 weeks after Skylar attended the prom, on July 14, 2017, police officers arrived at her home to meet with her parents, Kim and Scott. The officers stated that they needed to talk to Skylar about an incident she may have witnessed and assured her that nothing was wrong. Scott decided to drive Skylar to the police station, where they wanted to question her about an emergency call the police had received from a fertility clinic. Specifically, the doctor had reported that a patient had just given birth and may have buried the baby in the yard. After receiving this notice, the police immediately arrested Skylar and took her to a room for questioning. They did not allow her father to participate in the questioning. Before the questioning began, the police explained her rights to her. The investigator then started asking questions about the phone call from the doctor's office. The caller informed the police that on April 26, a doctor had examined Skylar and concluded that she was pregnant. However, Skylar later revealed to the doctor that the baby was dead and that she had buried the baby in her backyard. During her interview with the police, Skylar recounted a tragic event from her past. On May 7, 2017, she said that she had given birth to a baby girl in the bathroom, but the baby was not breathing and had no heartbeat. Therefore, she decided to bury the baby alone and did not tell anyone about the incident. To do this, Skylar quietly went downstairs, took a garden shovel, and dug a shallow grave in her backyard, where she buried the baby. She then left a vase with flowers at the burial site to mark and remember her deceased child. During a conversation with her parents, Skylar announced that she had chosen the name Annabelle for the baby and revealed that the baby's father was the cousin of a close friend she had dated briefly before meeting Brandon. Crime scene investigators went to the Richardson home to search for the child's remains. They searched the backyard by pulling weeds and sweeping the ground. The police carried out this process meticulously and carefully, removing any debris that might hinder their investigation. After overcoming the difficulties caused by the overgrown vegetation, they were able to collect a significant amount of evidence. After removing the weeds and cleaning the area, the police found several human bones, including skull fragments. These bones were carefully collected and placed in small body bags to preserve the evidence. Investigators ensured that the bones were kept intact. Later, one investigator noted that the bones had a smell, while another had difficulty determining whether they were rocks or human bones due to their small size. At the same time, the coroner confirmed the discovery of hair and small fingernails, but no organs or items that could help identify. After more than 5 hours of questioning, Skylar and her parents were allowed to return home. However, just 6 days after the incident, Skylar was contacted by the police and told that she needed to come to the police station again. To reassure her father, Scott, the police assured her that she would not face any legal action. During Skylar's next meeting with the police, they informed her that they had received new information from the medical examiner's office. This information revealed a discrepancy between Skylar's original story and what the police had discovered. Specifically, the medical examiner had found that the baby's bones showed signs of being burned, based on an analysis of the remains. Skylar was confused by the news of the baby being burned. She claimed that she did not set the fire and denied harming her child. However, the police still wanted Skylar to admit that she had killed her daughter and then burned the body to hide the evidence. During the investigation, the police suggested that Skylar may have wanted to cremate the baby so that the ashes would not be scattered. However, this suggestion only made Skylar more confused, and she still insisted that she did not burn the baby. Skylar suddenly changed her story to the police, saying that she had a lighter and may have used it to try to burn the baby's remains. She also suggested that the baby may have been born alive and had been crying, even making gurgling or small noises at one point. Additionally, Skylar admitted that she had held the newborn too tightly, which may have led to the baby's death. During an hour-long interrogation, the police gathered enough evidence to arrest Skylar on a charge of reckless homicide. Law enforcement suspected that Skylar had caused the child's death by suffocation. After presenting her case to a grand jury, she was charged with aggravated murder, a crime that carries a life sentence in Ohio. Skylar pleaded not guilty to other charges, including involuntary manslaughter, abuse of a corpse, and child abuse. She spent several days in jail until her family was able to post $50,000 bail to secure her temporary release. Following her child's death, Skylar became the focus of media attention and was subjected to intense public scrutiny. This severely affected her family's daily life. They felt unsafe and were forced to retreat into their home to seek peace and quiet. The threats had disastrous consequences, making it even harder for them to step outside. People who saw them often took pictures, which added to their stress and put enormous pressure on them. The constant public scrutiny became unbearable and affected almost every aspect of their daily lives. Although Skylar's lawyer believes that she made a false confession and that her newborn baby's death was not intentional, the prosecution has not changed its position. Despite new evidence that contradicts their initial assessment, they continue to pursue the case. A key piece of evidence that the prosecution initially presented was the results of a medical expert's examination, which stated that the child's remains had been burned. However, after a thorough examination and additional information, the expert retracted his initial assessment. Following a detailed physical examination of the child, the expert concluded that there was no evidence of burning. The prosecution's approach remained unchanged despite the new information. They continued to focus on Skylar's confession that she had tried to burn the remains, but this contradicted the evidence and raised questions about whether their case was actually convincing. This shows that the state was convicting despite flaws in the evidence. Skylar's lawyers fought hard at trial to defend her against the charges. Thanks to the efforts of her family, Skylar was able to raise the $50,000 bail she needed to be released. However, her bail was conditional on her wearing an electronic monitoring bracelet that would track her whereabouts. Skylar has been largely confined to her home and has had limited public exposure. She feels isolated and prefers to spend most of her time with her family dogs. Over the past 12 months, Skylar's life has undergone major changes as her plans to attend the University of Cincinnati have been put on hold while she awaits trial for her child's murder. The charges were so serious that Skylar's attorney filed a motion to change the venue, but the court denied it. As a result, Skylar was forced to continue attending the trial in the original jurisdiction as planned. The stress and pressure of the trial weighed heavily on her life. Moreover, Skylar had to deal with the psychological and emotional trauma caused by the charges, along with social isolation. Spending time with her dogs brought her comfort and a sense of solace. They became her trusted companions and main support during the time she awaited the trial. At the same time, her family remained by her side, supporting and encouraging her through this difficult period. They expressed their belief in her innocence and hoped that the truth would soon be revealed. Despite the difficult challenges, Skylar persisted in fighting for her freedom. In July 2019, the state made a surprise offer to Skylar's defense attorney. Skylar would plead guilty to the remaining charges and serve a 15-year prison sentence. In exchange, the state would withdraw the felony murder charge. Skylar's parents were uncertain about the decision and debated whether she should accept the deal. After careful consideration, Skylar decided to decline the offer. Her parents were deeply troubled by her decision and wondered if their daughter had made the right choice. However, they understood that it was ultimately Skylar's choice, and they had to respect it. On September 3, 2019, Skylar went to trial for the murder of her newborn daughter. During the trial, the state presented preliminary evidence, including a series of text messages that Skylar had sent to her mother. In these messages, she expressed her happiness after giving birth. She also shared that she was very pleased because her belly had returned to its normal size, stating that she would not allow it to return to how it was before. Notably, this message was sent just hours after she gave birth. Skylar texted her mother, "I am really speechless because I am so happy. My belly is back." On the second day of the trial, the prosecution presented new information about Skylar. They stated that Skylar sent several text messages to her mother and boyfriend less than a day after she killed her baby. These messages indicated that Skylar seemed very happy about her baby's death. The prosecution argued that these messages were critical evidence suggesting Skylar's involvement in the baby's death. In one message, Skylar wrote to her mother that she was excited because dinner was coming up and she could wear a cute outfit. She mentioned that her belly had just returned to normal and wanted to take advantage of this time to make things great. However, this text message could be interpreted as an attempt to mask her feelings of guilt, while simultaneously being excited about no longer being pregnant. The state argued that Skylar's use of the word excited suggested she was genuinely happy that her baby had died. They also presented evidence of a text message that Skylar sent to her boyfriend in which she stated that although the night before had been the worst, she felt much lighter and happier the next morning. According to the state, this text message implies that Skylar felt unburdened by the death of her baby. The state's position is that Skylar did not want to have the baby. They acknowledged that they could not provide concrete evidence that the baby was born alive. However, they pointed out that Skylar had admitted in her police interview that she heard the baby gurgling and crying. The state alleged that Skylar had searched the internet for information about abortion. It was also alleged that Skylar's mother, Kim, warned her that she would lose everything if she became pregnant. This warning instilled great fear in Skylar, causing her to try to keep her pregnancy a secret. When she could no longer hide her condition, she decided to take drastic measures. On the third day of Skylar's trial, the doctor who performed the autopsy on the baby testified. The autopsy revealed that the baby's cause of death was homicide. However, the doctor could not determine when the fractures in the baby's skull occurred, whether they happened before or after the baby died. In forming his opinion regarding the cause of the fractures, the doctor relied on Skylar's statements during the police interview. Skylar's defense attorney challenged the doctor's testimony, arguing that the doctor may have been biased in confirming the information. According to the attorney, the doctor had already formed an opinion and did not want to change it. During questioning, the doctor admitted that she had never examined the remains of the deceased child under a microscope. The defense attorney then asked the doctor if she had consulted with obstetricians. The doctor answered no. The attorney also asked if the doctor had seen photographs of the burial site or the backyard of Skylar's home. Again, the doctor replied no. Another doctor, specializing in fetal medicine, testified during the afternoon session of Skylar's trial, primarily when questioned by the prosecution. He stated that he suspected Skylar's baby was stillborn and added that she had only performed one screening. Knowing that the margin of error for fundal height measurements during the third trimester of pregnancy is 60%, he believed that Skylar could be carrying a healthy baby. He thought this was possible because Skylar had felt the baby move, and a dead baby would not normally move. He also questioned the report from the doctor who had provided information to the defense. The doctor had stated that Skylar's baby would likely have developmental problems. During cross-examination by the defense attorney, he asked the doctor if the prosecution had paid him. The doctor responded that he was paid $5,000 a day because that was the cost the hospital had to pay for another doctor. when they were short-staffed. As the prosecution presented their case against Schuyler, more shocking and heartbreaking evidence was introduced in court. The evidence that had the strongest impact on Schuyler was the images of the deceased child's remains shown on the television screen. These images left a deep and lasting impression on Schuyler, as was evident in her reaction during the trial. When the images of her child's remains appeared on the screen, Schuyler initially tried not to look at them. Her remarkably calm demeanor at that moment was a stark contrast to the day before, when she had been visibly shaken for a moment before the judge began the jury selection process. When Schuyler's defense attorneys presented their case, they argued that her life had been flawed and challenging even before she was charged with murder. They argued that much prosecution evidence presented a partial truth, with some documents was taken out. Schuyler's defense attorney argued that her frequent texting was not evidence that she killed her daughter. Instead, the attorney wanted to highlight Schuyler's mental health struggles, particularly an eating disorder that she had been battling since she was 12. This was supported by several pieces of evidence, including Schuyler seeing a psychologist and nutritionist regularly for treatment of her eating disorder. To support their case, they presented the jury with photos of Schuyler's changing appearance and weight over time. The photos included images of her looking very thin, as well as photos showing her looking slightly heavier. Her attorney stated that Schuyler held the baby for hours while she bled on the bathroom floor. Despite her critical condition, Schuyler remained committed to providing comfort and care for her baby after suffering unimaginable pain. Schuyler's attorneys said she decided to bury the baby in her backyard. They explained to the court that Schuyler had originally planned to tell her family about her impending pregnancy, but unfortunately did not have time to do so. Schuyler's doctor informed her that she was due in 8 to 10 weeks. Therefore, Schuyler thought she had enough time to attend prom and graduate from high school before talking to her mother. During the defense, an obstetrician testified that the baby had died before birth. The doctor argued that since Schuyler did not admit to cutting the umbilical cord, it was possible that it had been severed before or during the baby's birth. The doctor also argued that Schuyler's description of the baby's appearance was significant because she stated that the baby was white, suggesting that the baby may have died before birth. The obstetrician contended that a healthy newborn baby is not always pink. In fact, in his experience, newborns often have a purplish skin tone. Additionally, the doctor noted that Schuyler had only gained 15 pounds during her pregnancy. He suggested that this limited weight gain could be a sign of an eating disorder, which might have restricted the baby's growth in the womb. The doctor's testimony aimed to question the accuracy of what Schuyler told the police about the baby's health. Schuyler's defense argued that she had only told the police what she wanted to say during questioning. They also claimed that she had not witnessed or participated in any harm to the child. Their goal was to cast doubt on the credibility of Schuyler's testimony and suggest that other factors may have contributed to the child's death. Schuyler Richardson's trial lasted a week, and the jury then reached its final verdict. The verdict came quickly, after just 4 hours of deliberation. They acquitted Schuyler of aggravated murder, involuntary manslaughter, and child endangerment. However, Schuyler was convicted of abuse of a corpse, a serious crime punishable by up to a year in prison. Schuyler was held in custody until sentencing. During her sentencing hearing, she apologized for her actions and acknowledged the seriousness of the incident. The judge criticized Schuyler for her role in the tragic death of her child. The judge was certain that if Schuyler had made better decisions during her pregnancy, her child would still be alive. He severely criticized her actions and expressed disappointment that her choices led to serious consequences, including the death of her child. The judge also emphasized that Schuyler's decisions were directly responsible for the child's death. The 3-year probation sentence for corpse abuse that the judge imposed on Skylar also served as a warning that her actions were morally unacceptable and against the law. In November 2020, another judge agreed to reduce Skylar's probation to 2 years early at the request of her attorney. During the hearing, Skylar expressed her desire to return to a normal life and asserted that she no longer needed supervision. Recognizing Skylar's progress, the judge decided not to allocate any more probation resources to her case. The judge made it clear that probation is not meant to be a punishment or a form of rehabilitation, but rather to give an individual the opportunity to prove why they should not face prison time. Since her acquittal, Skylar has made the most of this opportunity. She has successfully completed 2 semesters of college and works part-time at the law firm that represented her. Despite her acquittal, Skylar has faced many difficulties in finding a part-time job. She has often been denied job opportunities due to her criminal history. However, that has not stopped her from pursuing her career goals. She has expressed a desire to attend law school and become a defense attorney, hoping to use her knowledge to help others overcome similar hardships. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sheila LaBar. Sheila LaBar was born in Fort Payne, Alabama on July 4, 1958. She was the youngest of 3 children and grew up on a farm surrounded by cornfields with her siblings, including her older brother and sister Lynn. According to Lynn, her older sibling, Sheila was an energetic, inquisitive, and creative girl. She loved being the center of attention, had a beautiful singing voice, and was very pretty. Her father Manuel Bailey's struggle with alcoholism had a profound impact on his family, especially his children, during their formative years. When affected, he became extremely aggressive and abusive, directing his anger at his wife and children. He would insult and humiliate them, attack them with any available object, and even force them to sleep outdoors, enduring the elements. Many times, Manuel's wife and children had no choice but to seek shelter in barns or fields, enduring harsh weather conditions such as heavy rain or freezing temperatures. Manuel's violent outbursts were a regular occurrence in the family. On one occasion, he threw dishes and objects at family members in a drunken rage. The mother tried to shield her children but was unsuccessful. A flower pot hit the youngest daughter, Sheila, in the head, causing her a severe concussion and leaving a permanent scar on her temple that she later covered with her hair. However, physical abuse was not the only trauma the sisters endured. According to Sheila and Lynn's memories, Manuel forced them into forced sex from a young age. Even though the mother may have known what was going on, she never addressed the problem or sought help for her daughters. Sheila studied very well, finding solace in her academic achievements in the midst of a difficult family life. She dreamed of escaping the countryside to pursue her ambitions in the city. With fierce determination and intense passion, Sheila aspired to realize her childhood dream in life and become an actress or a pop singer. She had everything for this: charisma, bright appearance, and a wonderful voice. Sheila's upbringing was tumultuous. At the age of 18, she left her parents' house, but adult life was difficult. She did not pass the university entrance exam because of her average grades, and she simply did not have the money to move to the big city. Therefore, Sheila took a job as a maid in a hotel where her sister worked. Sheila had a slim figure and a very attractive appearance, big blue eyes, a charming smile, and long, thick hair. She was given attention by men, and over time, she learned to use that attention and manipulate her suitors. Sheila met Jonathan Baxter in the late 1970s and they began a romantic relationship. Although Jonathan was not yet 20 years old, he had a young daughter from a previous relationship. However, the child did not become a barrier, and the couple soon married. However, their marriage did not last long and ended in divorce within a few months. The reason for the breakup was Sheila's treatment of Jonathan's daughter. She often became frustrated with the child and resorted to physical discipline, such as hitting her, or isolation, such as locking her in a closet when the child misbehaved or cried. When Jonathan discovered this, he was extremely distressed and immediately filed for divorce. He acted quickly, removing Sheila and her belongings from the house and making it clear that he never wanted to see or hear from her again. After the divorce, Sheila continued to date many men, and she often relied on them financially, but these relationships did not last long, lasting only a few weeks to a few months. However, in the early 1980s, she met Ronnie Jennings, who would later become her second husband. Their tumultuous love affair soon led to marriage. Unfortunately, it was an unhealthy relationship between two erratic and unstable people who often cheated on each other, caused scandals, and even fought. However, their marriage lasted more than 3 years. In 1984, after an argument, Sheila asked her husband for a divorce. But he refused. However, Ronnie's motive behind refusing her request was not to save the relationship, he just wanted to irritate his wife and drive her crazy. He succeeded. Sheila became hysterical, took a large amount of drugs in front of her husband, drank strong alcohol, and after this terrifying cocktail, got behind the wheel and drove off the road. As expected, Sheila lost consciousness shortly after and drove off the road at high speed, crashing into a tree. Despite the severity of the accident, Sheila miraculously survived, although she suffered severe head injuries that left her in a deep coma for over a week. During this time, medical professionals were unable to give any prognosis for her recovery. Sheila eventually recovered from her coma and was transferred to a psychiatric hospital, where she remained for several months. She later complained to her sister that one of the attendants was constantly harassing her. After all this, she was discharged from the hospital and returned to her second husband's home. But her behavior became increasingly erratic. She began to act aggressively and threaten him, culminating in a violent outburst in which she attacked Ronnie with nail scissors, stabbing him in the chest. Fearing for her safety and well-being, Ronnie filed for divorce and quickly moved away, ending their tumultuous relationship. After her second divorce, Sheila began looking for a lover through the dating columns of print newspapers and left her information there. She posted her information herself in the hope of meeting someone special, but her relationships did not last long. The reason was that she had a controlling personality, often dominating her partners in both her private and daily life. One day, a 60-year-old man named Wilfred Bill Labar happened to see her picture in the dating section. A twice-divorced man, Wilfred raised his children and grandchildren from previous marriages. After losing his wife a few years ago, he lived a solitary life on his large rural farm. Wilfred, a wealthy man from New Hampshire, owned a chiropractic practice and a horse farm. Despite his successful life, he still felt lonely and longed for a partner. It was then that he met Sheila, who was attracted by Wilfred's wealth and saw an opportunity for her. To attract his attention, Sheila began sending him provocative letters and photos through the post. Her plan worked and soon Wilfred invited her to visit his farm. Their romance quickly blossomed, with Wilfred showering her with expensive gifts. In the summer of 1987, Sheila moved in with him. Wilfred Bill Labar had no plans to marry Sheila, however, without waiting for his proposal, Sheila changed her name, calling herself Labar. Bill was surprised by this development, but he did not object. As their relationship progressed, Sheila began to control Wilfred's life, including his business, finances, and property. Due to the significant age difference, Wilfred had a hard time satisfying Sheila's need for intimacy. According to Sheila, Wilfred allowed her to see other men and she often brought her lovers to their homes. One of Sheila's lovers, who was in his mid-90s, was a Jamaican citizen named Wayne Ennis. He was much younger than Sheila and was initially hired as a nanny at the farm. Wayne eventually moved into the main house with Wilfred's consent, possibly under pressure from Sheila. Sheila and Wayne married in 1995 with an agreement that they would be monogamous, and Wayne assumed that from then on, he would be her only man. However, he soon realized that he was wrong as his wife continued to see other men. Wayne was not happy with this, and one day, he punched and kicked Sheila and her next lover, injuring them. Sheila, accustomed to being dominated, was the first time she had been attacked by someone else. She eventually filed for divorce and obtained a court order to prevent Wayne from approaching her, accusing him of violence and assault. Sheila's life remained volatile despite the divorce, as she continued to have affairs, frequently ending old relationships in favor of new ones. However, her relationships became increasingly complicated, often ending in lawsuits from her ex-partners who accused her of cruelty, threatening their lives, and causing physical harm. In one case, an ex-boyfriend claimed she deliberately hit him with her car, narrowly avoiding serious injury. Another accused her of fracturing his skull, while a third partner was left permanently scarred by lacerations to his face. As Sheila got older, her behavior became increasingly dangerous to those around her. She demanded absolute obedience from her partners, and when this expectation was not met, she often flew into rages. Wilfred Bill Labard then died in 2000 of heart failure at the age of 74. Although doctors and police found no evidence of foul play in his death, his family believed that Sheila had something to do with it. According to them, she had been poisoning Bill little by little over the years, effectively driving him to his death. After Wilfred's death, Sheila became the sole beneficiary of his estate, even though the couple had never formally married. Relatives tried to challenge this through the courts, but never got anywhere. They still believe that Sheila forced him to write a will. She wanted the house after Wilfred's death. After inheriting his entire estate, Sheila was free to do whatever she wanted without having to consider anyone else's opinion. She called her home a place of glamour and pleasure, where there were no inhibitions. And she began picking up men on the streets, in bars, on the internet, luring them to her and then trying to keep them at the farm for as long as possible. She didn't care about their age, skin color, or appearance. Sheila lured these men with promises of extraordinary pleasure and then tried to dominate and control them. Neighbors noticed that there were many different men constantly coming to the farm, but many left that day, while others stayed for a short time. The activities inside the house were shrouded in mystery. Sheila then turned her focus to finding sexual partners among men who were in financial trouble, needed a place to live, or were struggling with addiction. These people are easy targets for Sheila's manipulation tactics, as she presents herself as a wealthy widow, bragging about her supposed inheritance from 2004. A homeless man named Michael DeLog is struggling with addiction when he meets Sheila on a city street. Due to his circumstances, his family tries to get him into rehab, but he escapes from the treatment center. Michael's weakness leads him to accept Sheila's offer, who promises him food, shelter, and the stimulants he desires in exchange for a physical relationship. Moving to the farm, Michael becomes completely dependent on his lover. Afraid of being on the streets again, he complies with her every demand, and Sheila's desires become more sophisticated. She binds, beats, and humiliates Michael, taking pleasure in it. He tried to escape several times, walking dozens of miles and hiding in homeless shelters, but he never decided to go to the police for fear they would not believe him. Sheila repeatedly found Michael and brought him back to the farm. In desperation, he tried to contact his family members and let them know he was in trouble. They responded immediately, but unfortunately, it was too late. In October 2005, Michael DeLog mysteriously disappeared. When his family contacted Sheila, she claimed that they had broken up and Michael had left her, not knowing where he was. Despite efforts to find him, Michael was nowhere to be seen and no one he knew had seen him. Unfortunately, attempts to contact him were unsuccessful and the police report was fruitless, and Sheila remained unsuspected. While her house and car needed maintenance, so she was forced to find work. She chose a career that suited her, becoming an operator for intimate telephone services, using her charming voice to make a living. A man named Kenneth County, then 24 years old, fell into the trap and agreed to meet her in person. Kenneth was an attractive young man, kind and open, but he had one major weakness: his low IQ made him extremely gullible. This made him Sheila's ideal target. Kenneth was very close to his mother, financially dependent on her, but Sheila skillfully manipulated him, creating a rift between them and finally conquered him. She gave him an unforgettable night of love and promised that they would be like this all the time. The young man decided that he had met the woman of his dreams. He informed his relatives, and then moved into Sheila's house. After that, Sheila severely and relentlessly abused Kenneth. She had turned one of the rooms in her house into a torture chamber, where she regularly beat Kenneth severely and subjected him to other forms of physical and mental abuse. As a result, Kenneth's body was covered in numerous injuries, including bruises, abrasions, cuts, and burns. Kenneth was completely under Sheila's control and was not allowed to contact his loved ones. His family had no idea what was happening to him and could only speculate about his condition. It was only when neighbors occasionally saw Kenneth and were shocked by his frail appearance that the alarm was raised. Just days before Kenneth went missing, a local store employee took a disturbing photo of him with his cell phone, which was later used as evidence in court. The photo showed Kenneth extremely thin, with large bruises under his eyes and on his cheeks, and what appeared to be a broken nose, judging by the extent of the healing. All of these injuries occurred at different times, suggesting that he had been severely beaten over a long period of time. When he went to a store, the items in his trolley were disturbing: 2 large fuel drums, which were later discovered to have been used to cremate him. The store staff were confused and frightened by his appearance, so they contacted the police, suspecting a possible domestic violence incident. However, Sheila escaped and they were unable to charge her. Eventually, Kenneth lost contact with his family, and when his worried mother visited him at the farm owner, Sheila, responded aggressively and advised her to leave Kenneth alone, prompting Kenneth's family to file a missing person report. Expressing concern that he might be being held against his will at the farm. When the police arrived at Sheila's home, they witnessed a crematorium and disturbing discoveries. Sheila claimed that Kenneth had moved away because his mother, whom he said was afraid of him, had begun visiting regularly. To back up her claim, Sheila provided a recording in which she asked Kenneth if his mother had attacked him, and he quietly replied yes. The police found Sheila's story suspicious, and the next day, a police officer who visited Sheila obtained a search warrant for the estate. This was not the first time Sheila had attracted the attention of the police. She had been implicated in the mysterious disappearance of another boyfriend in the past. However, despite her past, Sheila had never been questioned or had her property searched until now. When the police arrived, they could not find Sheila at home, but they did notice several suspicious fires burning near the outbuildings. These fires were very unusual and involved a variety of materials such as mattresses, pieces of wooden furniture, hay, and other items soaked in flammable substances. Upon closer inspection, it was discovered that one of the fires contained human remains in the form of bones. Police immediately requested additional assistance from forensic experts to document their findings, but what they discovered next was even more shocking. Police found numerous blood stains that had not been cleaned up throughout the house, indicating a violent crime had occurred. The large amount of blood suggested that a horrific massacre may have occurred. The blood found at the scene belonged to at least 3 different people. The body found in the fire was identified as that of the missing Kenneth County. 2 empty fuel cans were discovered nearby, matching the cans Kenneth had purchased at a local store the day before his disappearance. Further investigation uncovered the body of Michael DeLog, who had been missing for several years. Police also found several fingers belonging to an unidentified third person. In addition, a large number of items, believed to have belonged to several men due to their varying sizes, were recovered from the farm's storage pit, but their owners remain unknown. Sheila was not present at the time of the police visit, as she had already discovered them and planned to flee. Sheila hitchhiked to Boston to evade arrest. Along the way, she hitched a ride with a driver and eventually formed a relationship with him, leading him to invite her to stay with him. However, the next day, after watching a TV news report about a manhunt for a dangerous criminal, the driver called the police and reported that Sheila was currently in his bed. A disturbing discovery was made during the search of Sheila's home, a collection of videotapes. The recordings depicted men, including Kenneth, Michael, and several others, confessing to serious crimes. However, the men's visible distress and condition suggested that these confessions had been coerced through torture. After Sheila was arrested, concerns about her mental health prompted the court to order an evaluation. The results showed that Sheila suffered from delusional disorder and symptoms of schizophrenia. She believed that she was an angel sent from heaven to protect children from rapists. Her attorney used her poor mental health to create a defense, portraying her as terminally ill and unaware of her actions. This claim was based on severe mental and physical trauma she had suffered as a child. Sheila claimed that, years earlier, she had had a near-death experience after being in an accident and falling into a coma. During this time, she said, she encountered God and was tasked with ridding the world of men who harmed children. Sheila's ex-husbands and several of her lovers also took the stand in court, all of whom described her as insane, unstable, and extremely violent. In particular, her third husband, Wayne Anise, claimed that Sheila had repeatedly urged him to kill Wilfred Bill LaBar, apparently motivated by his desire to take his estate. However, the defense team's efforts to portray Sheila as insane and in need of psychiatric care were unsuccessful. Instead, it was determined that she was fully aware of her actions when she committed the crime. Sheila was ultimately convicted in July 2008 and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Any appeals she filed were subsequently denied. Sheila is currently serving her sentence at the Homestead Correctional Facility in Florida. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Mackenzie Sherilla. Mackenzie Sherilla was born in August 2004 in Strongsville, Ohio. The youngest of 3 children, Mackenzie received a lot of love and pampering from her parents, John Sherilla and Natalie Stevens. Her parents prioritized her education and encouraged she to pursue every goal she loved. Being the youngest also gave her a tolerance. She was often forgiven for many of her mischievous pranks during her childhood, and even when she committed some more serious mistakes, she would still be forgiven by her parents. Mackenzie grew up as a spoiled and entitled girl who often got her way. Her parents gave in to her demands, which led her to believe she could act however she wanted without consequence. As a young child, she was kind and friendly, but as she grew older, her behavior and character began to deteriorate. If things didn't go her way, she would throw tantrums, lose her temper, and use bad language. She was prone to physical altercations and would often disregard others. Mackenzie only cared about her own opinions and desires, insisted on getting her way, and prioritized her own interests above all else. During his teenage years, Mackenzie became very difficult and unbearable personality, but her parents never thought it was out of the ordinary. To them, her behavior was a normal part of growing up and a phase she would eventually outgrow. They chose to respond with understanding and patience. However, Mackenzie's behavior worsened over time. In high school, she started using alcohol and occasionally experimenting with illicit drugs, often managing to avoid consequences for her actions. Her reckless behavior not only endangers herself but also the people around her. Mackenzie's parents seemed to be unaware of, or possibly chose to ignore, the obvious issues their daughter was facing. Like many teenagers, she was glued to her smartphone and frequently posted provocative photos and comments on social media. Her actions weren't unusual among her friends, as they often engaged in vandalism, fought, stole, and had run-ins with the police. However, they rarely faced serious consequences, typically receiving only warnings and educational discussions, which may have led them to believe that they could act as they pleased without facing repercussions. Dominic Russo, a young man from Strongsville, was a stark contrast to Mackenzie. Born in September 2001, he was the fourth of 7 children to Frank and Christine Russo. Growing up, Dominic was close to his 3 brothers and 3 sisters. He was an exemplary student, actively participated in sports, and prioritized a healthy lifestyle. Throughout his childhood, Dominic excelled academically, participated in sports, and prioritized a healthy lifestyle. Despite being part of a large family, Dominic and his siblings never lacked parental love, attention, or care. Frank and Christine Russo were moderately strict but also supportive of their children's interests. As a result, Dominic always had a lot of friends and was accustomed to being the center of attention. His attractive appearance and charming personality made him a popular figure, and he had many admirers from a young age. However, Dominic preferred to focus on meaningful relationships rather than fleeting romances. After completing high school, Dominic attended a local university, specializing in performing arts with a focus on music production. His ambition was to become a renowned music producer, and he was also a skilled singer-songwriter. By the time he was 20, Dominic had established his own business, purchased a car, and was living in a rented apartment in a good neighborhood. Additionally, he excelled as a student and athlete at the university. Dominic first met Mackenzie at a mutual friend's party. This chance encounter turned out to be pivotal for both of them. As complete opposites, they found themselves drawn to each other. Dominic, with his charming and cultured demeanor, quickly caught Mackenzie's eye. He was distinctly different from the people she normally socialized with, possessing qualities that set him apart. He was well-educated, well-mannered, and engaging, able to effortlessly converse on a wide range of topics. Mackenzie had a striking appearance and a slender figure that caught people's attention. She knew how to present herself and often relied on her charm to make an impression. Mackenzie quickly won over the guy she had been interested in, Dominic, and by fall 2021, they started dating. Not long after that, the two introduced each other to their families. While Mackenzie's parents were thrilled with her choice, considering the guy an excellent match for their daughter, Dominic's parents had mixed feelings about Mackenzie. They found her endearing and innocent at first, but there was something about her that immediately raised concerns for Frank and Christine Russo. Those close to Mackenzie believed she had truly fallen in love for the first time, and they hoped this relationship would have a positive impact on her life. Unfortunately, no one could have predicted the tragic endings that would eventually bring their romance to an end. As Mackenzie and Dominic spent more time together, they began to appear in public, holding hands and showing affection for each other. It wasn't long before the entire small town knew about their relationship. While some people who knew Mackenzie well felt sorry for her boyfriend, Dominic, most were simply happy for the couple. As time passed, Dominic started to notice strange behavior in Mackenzie. She was constantly defiant and tried to get everyone to do what she wanted. At first, Dominic thought her behavior was due to her youth and desire for attention. Despite her behavior, the couple made plans for their future, discussing marriage as soon as Mackenzie turned 18. They also hoped to leave their small town and move to a big city, such as New York, where Dominic could pursue a music career and showcase his talent. Over time, Mackenzie's behavior became increasingly alarming and sometimes frightening to Dominic. She asks him to do what she wants, and if he doesn't agree with her, she gets angry and acts very nasty. Dominic initially disregarded Mackenzie's controlling behavior as a joking matter, but then he soon realized her true nature. In public, she maintained a composed exterior, but when they were alone, she took out her anger on him and sometimes attacked him. Dominic felt he couldn't stand his girlfriend any longer and proposed a temporary separation to reconsider their feelings. However, Mackenzie responded by having a very breakdown in front of their mutual friends. She yelled, threatened to harm Dominic if he ended the relationship, and even threatened to burn down his house and wreck his car. These actions had the opposite effect of what Mackenzie intended. This makes Dominic even more want to end their toxic relationship. Mackenzie was determined to hold on to her boyfriend, refusing to acknowledge the end of the relationship. Initially, she acted as though nothing was wrong, continuing to call Dominic and invite him to various parties and events. She also posted affectionate photos of the two on social media, express her love for him. However, when Dominic made it clear that the relationship was over, Mackenzie's behavior changed. She became furious and began showing up at his house almost daily, standing under his window and shouting insults and threats. She also resorted to calling him from different phone numbers, leaving messages on his answering machine, and sending emails. In these messages, Mackenzie's tone was inconsistent. Sometimes she will gently express her feelings for him and offer to restart the relationship. However, there are times when she will use insults and threats against Dominic. Dominic was baffled by Mackenzie's behavior, having never experienced anything similar before. He struggled to respond and tried various approaches, including talking to her and ignoring her. He also documented her aggressive outbursts using his phone. The situation became unbearable as Mackenzie would publicly scream at and insult Dominic whenever she saw him, making his life extremely difficult. Despite this, Dominic held on to the hope that with time, Mackenzie would eventually leave him alone and move on. Mackenzie made a shocking statement in front of witnesses, saying it would be easier for her to kill Dominic than to let him move on from her. She threatened that if he didn't return to her, she would make sure no one else could have him. At first, Dominic didn't take her words seriously, but those around him knew she was not joking. Her threats also included hitting and running him over with a car, driving him off a cliff, or stopping on railroad tracks in front of an oncoming train. She described each scenario in detail, as if she had already planned it out. However, Mackenzie soon realized that her threats and insults only pushed Dominic further away. She decided to change her tactics, switching from being aggressive to being sweet and charming again. She stopped pressuring and harassing Dominic and pretended to have learned from her mistakes, wanting to change for the better. She started talking about college plans, asking for his help in choosing a university, and claiming that she had become more focused on her studies, particularly her upcoming final exams. Dominic was pleasantly surprised by the changes in Mackenzie and, still having feelings for her, he decided to help her with her university enrollment. As they started seeing each other again, they gradually rekindled their closeness. Dominic began taking her on dates and spending all his free time with her, thinking she had become more mature and responsible. He fell in love with her again without even realizing it, and their past issues seemed to fade away. This time, they kept their reunion private and didn't tell their friends and acquaintances about it. Therefore, their dates are private and discreet, allowing them to enjoy their time together without seeking outside attention. When Dominic's brother Angelo found out, he warned that nothing good would come of it. But Dominic didn't listen because he loved her too much, so he didn't pay attention to his brother's words. Dominic thinks that Mackenzie has changed positively after they reunited, but he had no idea what she was really planning. Unbeknownst to him, Mackenzie had devised a sinister plan to exact revenge on him. She became obsessed with the idea of a disastrous car accident. She would spend her free time traveling around the city and looking for the perfect place to carry out her plan. Mackenzie considered crashing into a steep cliff or stepping in front of the train, but she couldn't find cliff nearby and thought the idea of blocking the train was untrustworthy. One day, while driving through an industrial area, she stumbled upon a secluded spot with no cameras or traffic. A massive brick wall caught her attention, and her twisted imagination quickly conjured up a new and equally horrific plan. She decided that accelerating to top speed and crashing into the wall would be just as spectacular as the other ideas she had considered. Initially, Mackenzie had planned to end her life alongside her lover, Dominic, intending for their tragic story to become a cautionary tale for the entire city. She had confided in her best friend about this plan, but her friend thought she was joking because she had had such wild ideas before. In late July 2022, just days before Mackenzie's 18th birthday, she asked Dominic if he wanted to attend a mutual friend's party with her. She told him that it would be the perfect opportunity for them to have some fun, relax, and make it clear to everyone that they were back together and deeply in love. Dominic quickly agreed, as he still trusted Mackenzie and didn't question her feelings or intentions. On the night of July 30th, Dominic and Mackenzie arriving at the party holding hands. Their entrance caught everyone's attention, and they looked happy and in love as they openly displayed their affection for each other. Their friends were genuinely thrilled to see them reunited but notice how well-suited the couple was. When night fell, Dominic and Mackenzie freely took photos, kissed and enjoyed their time together without any hesitation. However, no one had any idea that this joyful celebration would take a devastating turn. Dominic and Mackenzie drank some alcohol, like other people at that party, but Mackenzie secretly took a dose of illegal drugs, for courage, to not change her mind at the last minute and slammed on the brakes. The next morning, Dominic and Mackenzie bid farewell to the guests and began to head out to their car. However, they were approached by a friend of the guy, Davion Flanagan, who requested a ride home in their vehicle. Mackenzie tried to decline request, said that they had made other plans, but Dominic didn't see any problem with driving his friend home. Mackenzie eventually relented, and she agreed to give Davion a ride home. Mackenzie took the driver's seat, with Dominic beside her and Davion behind him. They left the party venue and headed onto the main road. Mackenzie drove cautiously, adhering to the speed limit and avoiding drawing attention to themselves. When they approached an empty intersection, she stopped at the red light. As they waited, Davion dozed off, allowing her to reconsider her intentions. In her later statement, Mackenzie claimed she had planned to die in an accident, but her words were discredited by the fact that she had buckled her seatbelt during the previous stop, while Davion remained unbuckled. As the light turned green, Mackenzie suddenly accelerated and took a sharp turn onto a poorly lit secondary road that led into an industrial area. Dominic and Davion seemed unaware of what was happening, and the cars sped up as if Mackenzie had lost control. Pressing hard on the gas pedal, she careened the vehicle toward a brick wall. Luckily, a witness happened to be in the area. On an early Sunday morning, the industrial area was deserted, with no other people around to see the accident or offer assistance. However, a woman who lived near the scene heard the crash and went outside to find out what's happening. Seeing smoke and realizing a car had crashed, she quickly returned to her home to call for emergency help. About 30 minutes after the accident, medics arrived at the scene. Unfortunately, Davion and Dominic in the car succumbed to their injuries and died instantly. Mackenzie, however, was fortunate to have survived thanks to her seatbelt and airbags. Mackenzie, the driver, was unconscious and trapped in the wreckage with severe leg injuries, but she was breathing and had a palpable pulse, giving hope that she will survive. During the process of being freed from the car, Mackenzie briefly regained consciousness but she appeared disoriented and unaware of her surroundings. Once released from the vehicle, she was immediately rushed to the hospital for treatment. At the hospital, doctors diagnosed Mackenzie with multiple fractures and viscera injuries. Blood tests also revealed that she had been under the influence of both alcohol and drugs at the time of the accident. The police initially received leads and a confession in the investigation. After learning the results of Mackenzie's tests, it was thought that she was under the influence of addictive substances and didn't understand her actions. It's possible she tried to drive through the wall or didn't notice any obstacles, as there was no sign of braking. Since Mackenzie was unconscious in the intensive care unit after a complex operation, the police couldn't question her at first. When she regained consciousness, she became hysterical and confessed to the doctor, saying she deliberately crashed into the wall to kill Dominic and initially intended to die with him. Mackenzie also said that Dave was an unintended victim because he was hitchhiking in their car. Doctors dismissed Mackenzie's confession, believing it was a delusional state caused by anesthesia, painkillers, and grief over her boyfriend's death. However, when the police spoke with Mackenzie, her story changed completely. This time, Mackenzie said she remembered almost nothing about the incident of that night due to consuming alcohol and using illegal substances. Mackenzie claimed she had a memory lapse after getting in the car and had no idea how Davion ended up in the car. However, evidence contradicted this. Surveillance footage tracked the car's initial route and showed Mackenzie driving cautiously and following the rules until she suddenly turned onto a road leading to an industrial area. Furthermore, it was discovered that Mackenzie had previously driven the entire route days earlier, and her car had been spotted by multiple witnesses. After being discharged from the hospital, Mackenzie quickly recovered and attempted to resume her disinterested life. She showed no remorse for her actions and was confident about evading consequences. She became active on social media again, met with friends, and made future plans. By September, she even attended a concert in a nearby city, featuring her favorite band, seemed unaffected by her boyfriend's passing. Mackenzie lived an active life despite having her legs in a fragile state. She would often appear at concerts in a wheelchair, wearing vibrant makeup and taking selfies to share on social media. Just a month after recovering, Mackenzie attended a Halloween party in a pre-made costume where she met new people and enjoyed herself. However, her life has changed completely on November 4, 2022, when she was taken into custody. The investigation gathered enough evidence to bring the case to trial. Mackenzie was charged with premeditated aggravated double murder and possession of a controlled substance found in her pocket and detected in her blood. However, during the trial, Mackenzie changed her testimony multiple times. Initially, she claimed to have memory loss, but when her friend testified against her, revealing her plan, she shifted her defense. Mackenzie then claimed she had intended to die alongside her lover, but this was disproven when it was discovered she had secured herself with a seatbelt. Mackenzie Sherrill was found guilty of all charges on August 21, 2023. However, due to her age at the time of the crime, just 5 days shy of her 18th birthday, the court took this into consideration and tried her as a minor. Under state law, Mackenzie was eligible for consecutive 15-year prison sentences without parole for each murder she committed. However, due to her young age, the court decided to let her serve these sentences simultaneously. This meant she would be eligible for parole in 15 years. By that time, Mackenzie would be 33 years old. Both the prosecution and defense expressed displeasure with the court's decision. Dominic family members felt the sentence was too lenient, and they intended to appeal for a stricter punishment. On the other hand, Mackenzie's parents and lawyer believed the sentence was too harsh and decided to appeal as well. The judge refused to change the sentence, questioning whether Mackenzie would be released after 15 years in prison. In his opinion, Mackenzie showed no remorse for her actions and displayed arrogance towards the court. The extended prison term would provide her with ample time to reflect on the gravity of her crimes. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Borden family. The Borden family's story began in Missouri when Michael and Catherine met as classmates in school. Michael was drawn to Catherine, who was blonde, radiant, and responsive. He used different methods to capture her attention, like helping with homework and inviting her for walks. This led them to become best friends, spending much time together, learning, and sharing secrets. Over time, their friendship blossomed into love. Michael invited Catherine on a date, during which he first expressed his love for her. After some time, they got married in a beautiful and memorable ceremony, where they vowed to love each other through all of life's challenges. 10 years into their marriage, they moved to Lititz, Pennsylvania, a town founded by members of the Moravian Church in 1756 and home to descendants of Moravian communities. Life in the town was calm and serene. Many families were part of the Christian Amish community and lived in a way that reflected their beliefs. They embraced simplicity, choosing to forego many modern technologies. The Borden family was very religious, so choosing Lititz was intentional. This suburb seemed ideal for raising children, as life there was consistently peaceful. Each day was similar to the previous one, offering the tranquil environment the family of Borden desired for family life and spiritual connection with God. Michael was involved in the local church, where he taught Sunday school, while Catherine mainly took care of the home and helped her husband with his community work. Michael primarily worked for spiritual fulfillment, but to support his everyday needs, he worked as a manager at a printing company. Over the years, they had 5 children, 3 boys and 2 girls. Most families in Lititz were large, with many having more than 5 children. To protect their children from the challenges and dangers of the wider world, families often attended church, WH. Our local teenagers participated in youth groups and they were homeschooled. Interaction between families was mainly through joint religious organizations and celebrations. The family ideal established by Michael Borden continued for many years, raising children with faith and discipline. At the beginning of the 2000s, the oldest sons left for university in another city, leaving 3 children at home. These children continued their homeschooling, much to their parents' satisfaction. Neighbors and the couple's few friends praised the children's upbringing and their wide range of interests. Kara, Caitlin, and Daniel were known for being exemplary, kind, and responsive, although this wasn't always the case. However, when Kara, the eldest daughter, hit her teenage years, she totally shook up the family traditions. Against her father's wishes, she started playing for the local soccer team, sneaking out to nightclubs, and doing everything she used to be forbidden from doing. Her behavior affected her father. Long talks and guidance just couldn't get through to Kara. Arguments became frequent and often led to her running away. She openly showed interest in boys and sought out relationships. In 2005, David Ludwig, who was 18, and Kara Borden, who was 14, met in a support group for students with homeschooling issues. They were both quickly formed a close friendship, unbeknownst to their parents. They decided to create social media profiles to communicate secretly. Their exchanges were frequent and emotional, and they used encoded messages to keep their conversations hidden for as long as possible. After some time, exchanging letters was no longer sufficient, so they started meeting in secret. Initially, they took walks in quiet, secluded areas around the city. Gradually, their friendship turned into a romantic relationship. They began sneaking out at night to go to discos and stayed together until morning. David, being older, had already experienced first love and here. Break. Kara, on the other hand, was so young that her emotions were overwhelming. Kara was very young, so her emotions were intense. She didn't simply walk, she appeared to glide, with a joyful smile constantly on her lovely face. Meeting David made Kara become obedient to her parents again. Her father was thrilled, thinking the teenage troubles were a thing of the past. But Michael was wrong. It was only the fear of being found out by her parents that calmed the girl's rebellious spirit while she hid her love for David. This saddened Kara a lot, as she knew how her parents would react to relationships at such a young age. Since childhood, they had instilled very different ideas about the possible love between a man and a woman, trying to protect her from that reality for as long as possible. Fearing her parents' negative reaction, they guarded their secret very carefully, but sooner or later, all secrets come to light. One day, Kara couldn't hold back any longer and shared her secret with her sister. She showed her a photo of David and explained how their relationship started, expressing how deeply in love they were and their determination to be together against all odds. They were even ready to elope. Worried for Kara's safety, her sister told their mother about the elopement plans, revealing the secret of them. Early one morning, Kara quietly climbed through the window into the house and tiptoed to her room, feeling thrilled. She had just returned from a date with David. However, when she entered her room, she froze. Her mother was sitting on her bed, and the situation became pressured without a word being spoken. After breakfast, Kara's parents told her she was not allowed to have any relationship with the young man. Her parents were upset because they had tried to protect their children from violence, drugs, and other negative influences, and they couldn't believe this had happened. Kara's father was so angry and disappointed that he wouldn't let her leave her room that night. However, Kara spent the night at David's house instead. At 5:30 a.m., David dropped her off near her home. They had agreed that Kara would text him as soon as she safely returned to her room. But the message never came. David called her home several times and sent a few messages on social media. An hour later, Kara told him she had been caught and asked him to come over so her parents could talk to him. David arrived on time for the meeting. The conversation started with Kara's father expressing strong anger and forbidding David from seeing his daughter. Kara's parents held very conservative values and were firmly against her having relationships at such a young age. The father's heart was unmoved by David's words of love. He warned David that if he saw him with Kara again, he would report him to the police for being involved with a minor. Despite the long and emotional discussion, it ended without resolution. Kara was locked in her room once more, and David left empty. Indeed. He got into his old car and drove away, crying for the first time over a girl, or perhaps because he felt he wasn't taken seriously. The separation was very difficult. The lovers struggled with being apart and couldn't handle it, so they decided to deceive everyone. They pretended to break up to meet Kara's father's demands but continued their secret love affair. In public or at church, they acted like ex-lovers and didn't even acknowledge each other. Kara's parents felt reassured, believing they had safeguarded their daughter from a rash decision. David missed Kara deeply. In the evenings, he read Shakespeare, dreaming of serenading her openly like Romeo. However, like in the Capulet and Montague story, the lovers couldn't reconcile their families to win their approval. David Ludwig took determined steps regarding his relationship with Kara. He called her home to arrange a meeting with her father, intending to discuss their plans to marry. On November 13, 2015, David arrived at the Borden residence to speak with Michael, Kara's father. He expressed his love for Kara, their ongoing relationship, and their intention to get married. Michael dismissed the idea, saying it would never happen. Expecting such a reaction, David, driven by anger, pulled out a handgun and shot Michael in the back as he was heading to the front door. David then went to find Kara's mother, Catherine, and shot her while she was sitting in a chair. David searched the house for Kara, calling her name, but he couldn't find her. Later, as he was driving away, he saw Kara running towards him down the road. She got into the car and told David she wanted to leave, get married, and start a new life far away. They fled the city in David's red car. But why would a 14-year-old girl run away with someone who had just been so brutal? Wasn't she shocked and scared? Both were seen as good kids. How did they become criminals? Kara Borden went missing for 24 hours after her parents, Michael and Catherine Borden, were found dead. After examining surveillance footage, the police tracked the teenagers. The footage showed that Kara went with David willingly, so the charges of abducting her were dropped against David. Alerts were sent across the east as police in Pennsylvania and Indiana investigated reports of the couple heading west in a red Volkswagen Jetta. On Monday morning, authorities received a tip about a vehicle matching the description parked near a truck stop outside Fort Wayne. However, when the police arrived, the car was gone. State police were alerted, and patrol officers spotted the car on I-70 in Belleville around noon. David Ludwig entered the interstate and led them on a 5-mile chase, reaching speeds of 90 to 95 miles per hour on a 2-lane highway. State Trooper Alex, who participated in the pursuit, described David as extremely reckless and dangerous, causing multiple accidents like scenes from an action movie. The saga of the runaway lovers became a major national news story. Television broadcasts showed the capture of the teenage fugitives after the boy had killed his girlfriend's parents and fled with her. It was revealed that David and Kara planned to escape far away, get married, and start a new life. The district attorney announced that the earlier Kara abduction charge against David would be dismissed, but the charges for the deaths of Michael and Catherine would continue. After the incident, David and Kara fled together and were on the run from the authorities for about 28 hours before being captured in Indiana. Kara did not face any charges. David was held without bail on charges of murder and abduction. Kara was placed under the care of relatives and church members. David Ludwig was arrested on November 14, 2005, after a high-speed chase that ended when his vehicle crashed into a tree. He was charged with the deaths of the Michael and Catherine following a prolonged conflict. 14-year-old Kara did not face any charges. On November 16, David was extradited back to Pennsylvania after waiving extradition. David confessed to 2 counts of intentional harm, stating that it was a deliberate act and that he intended to shoot them if they got in their way, which he did. During the young man's arrest, the police searched his vehicle and found no weapons. However, when they went to David's home, they discovered 54 firearms belonging to his father, a hunter who had taught David how to use them. In an 18-minute video from a laptop found in the house, David is seen discussing a plan to invade another family's home. The video also shows him bringing weapons into the house. According to court documents, finally he decided not to go through with the plan because there were too many cars at the location. The police declared Kara Borden a victim in the case, yet David filed court documents claiming that surveillance footage from various stores along their route would prove she was not abducted. David did not resist efforts to return him to Pennsylvania. A Pennsylvania judge ordered him held without bail. He was not represented by an attorney during the charge presentation. A preliminary hearing was set for November 23. The trial of David was brief. According to court documents, Kara's 13-year-old sister, Caitlin, told investigators that her parents were shot after arguing with David for about an hour. Caitlin saw David shoot her father and then ran to the bathroom, where she heard a second shot, presumably the one that took her mother's life. David then ran through the house calling for Kara. She told investigators that the couple's 9-year-old son, Daniel, ran to neighbors who called 911, reporting the tragic event. In June 2006, David entered a plea agreement with District Attorney Donald R. Totero, who had sought the death penalty as punishment. David pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree perpetrating, among other charges, and was immediately sentenced to 2 consecutive life in prison sentences. He was also ordered to pay $125,000 in restitution. Since 2006, Kara has been under guardianship represented by legal counsel. In a written statement published on November 22, 2005, the abduction charge against David was dropped, with the court concluding that Kara left with David of her own free will. David's lawyer reportedly stated that Kara voluntarily accompanied David during their journey through 3 states, and surveillance recordings showed that Kara had ample opportunity to escape. Kara admitted that she ran after David as he left her house. She simply wished to marry her beloved David. Kara has been identified as a victim in this tragic situation, and thus the District Attorney of Lancaster County did not levy any criminal charges against her. Her actions alongside David's during the investigation and the digital trail of emails, blogs, and texts they left behind contributed to this decision. At a solemn memorial service held at Lancaster Bible College, Kara, amidst her siblings, mourned her pair. NTS. The Borden family's neighborhood showed its respect and remembrance by adorning mailboxes with white ribbons. The loss left 5 children without the guidance and love of their parents. George Landis, an elder from the Monterey Chapel, reflected on the incident by saying that the purpose behind such loss is known only to God, reassuring that Michael and Catherine are in a better place. Vera Zimmerman, 50, familiar with the Borden family and David's mother for 7 years, remarked on the upbringing of the children, pointing out that a lapse in judgment led to the unfortunate events. David's appeal for release was finally denied by the State Appeals Court, as reported by the Lancaster County District Attorney's Office after his sentencing on June 20. David underwent several evaluations at Camp Hill before being transferred to a state prison in Indiana County, where he began serving his life sentence for the murder of his girlfriend's parents. The tragic case of the Borden family serves as a haunting reminder of how seemingly innocent relationships can spiral into devastating consequences. What began as a story of young love evolved into a dark tale of rebellion, betrayal, and violence, leaving an entire family shattered and 2 lives forever altered. The aftermath of this heartbreaking event highlights the fragility of trust, the dangers of secrecy, and the far-reaching impact of a single, catastrophic decision. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Ada Betty Quadros Fernandez. Ada Betty Quadros Fernandez was born on September 13, 1977, in the coastal town of Chimbote, Peru. She was the first child of Victor Quadros, a veterinarian, and Fernandez, a teacher. Ada was the eldest of 4 siblings and consistently performed well academically, even winning knowledge contests. She had a happy childhood filled with dreams of self-improvement. Ada later recounted that she spent much of her childhood with one of her sisters on their grandparents' farm, enjoying the close connection with nature and animals. This period on the farm was one of the happiest times of her life. Ada came from a family that was not poor but also not wealthy. As a teenager, she looked for ways to contribute financially to her family. Together with her sister and a friend, she formed a group to entertain at children's parties. After high school, Ada enrolled in a private university to study law. However, her financial situation did not allow her to continue, and she had to drop out. Despite this setback, Ada remained determined to succeed and support her family. With this goal in mind, she applied for a U.S. visa. Like many young people from Peru and other Latin American countries, Ada saw the United States as a land of opportunities. She was determined to move there, work hard, earn a better income, and pave the way for a brighter future for herself and her family. Her family enthusiastically supported her decision. They sold some of their belongings and did everything they could to gather enough money for her journey. Her destination was Texas, where she initially planned to stay with some relatives. In early 2004, she started working as a waitress in a restaurant. Later, she joined a company that placed nannies in households. It was through this job that she met the Lazarchik family. The Lazarchik family consisted of Father Michael, generally known as Mike, Mother Renee, their oldest daughter Alyssa, and the twin boys Ryan and Kyle. Little is known about the family background, except that they got married in 2000. Soon after their wedding, Renee became pregnant with their first child, Alyssa. After Alyssa's birth, they were expecting twins, Kyle and Ryan. The Lazarchik couple wanted to hire a trustworthy babysitter to take care of the twins when Renee went back to work. Alyssa was already attending a daycare where she had made several friends, so they decided she would continue being cared for there. They interviewed several candidates, and Ada stood out as the best option. She was young, but not a teenager. She appeared healthy, strong, polite, and cheerful. Renee wanted Ada to start immediately so that she could work with her for a few weeks and explain the household routines, the state of affairs, and her expectations. She also wanted to see how Ada would take care of the twins. The family had a specific requirement. They wanted assurances that Ada would stay with them for 18 months, and Ada agreed to this arrangement. Initially, they was agreed that she would spend only daytime hours in the Lazarchik household, but after some time they asked her to move in, and Ada agreed. Everything appeared to progress well. The Lazarchik family was satisfied with her work and grew fond of her, placing complete trust in her. Numerous photographs documented joyful moments with the smiling young nanny holding the twins. However, the situation changed dramatically in the summer of 2005. Ada informed the Lazarchik family that her relatives were returning to Peru before relocating to Germany. Ada was prepared to accompany them and had already purchased her plane ticket for October 29th of that year. Understandably, this came as disappointing news for the couple, as it was not in line with their previous agreement. Eventually, they understood and simply asked Ada to stay until they could find a replacement. They even requested her help in searching for and selecting her successor. Ada agreed, but from that moment on, she no longer stayed overnight at the Lazarchik's house. Instead, she returned to her uncle's house at night and came back early in the morning. Given the change in circumstances and Ada's impending departure, the Lazarchik family scheduled interviews with several nanny candidates on October 12th. During the day, Renee called Ada and asked her to prepare macaroni and cheese for the children. Ada fulfilled the request and fed the children. When Renee returned home, she greeted her children, saw that they were fine, and after interviewing the candidates, spent more than an hour with her little ones before they went to bed. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Kyle typically woke up crying at 5 a.m. on Thursday, October 13th. Twins usually sleep heavily and require someone to wake them, but Kyle woke up on his own. Renee got up, went to the twins' room, picked up Kyle, and soothed him until he fell back asleep. She then returned to bed. 2 hours later, at 7:30, Mike went to the kids' room, woke them up, hugged and kissed them, and left them in Renee's care before going to work. She changed Ryan's diaper, said goodbye to twins, and went to work. The kids were fine, nothing out of the ordinary, except for Kyle's early waking that day. His older sister, Alyssa, went to daycare as usual, but things took a dramatic turn around 1 p.m. when Ada called 911, very agitated, saying that one of the kids, Kyle, had stopped breathing and was turning blue. According to the information provided, the operator gave instructions on how to perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation on the child. The person carried out the instructions until the emergency medical responders arrived. After a few minutes, they reached the house and took over the care of Kyle. They asked Ada what had happened, and she, very upset, explained that after lunch she had put Kyle down for a nap and returned to get his brother. But when she came back with Ryan, Kyle began vomiting and stopped breathing. While the paramedics were attending to Kyle, Ada called Renee to inform her of the situation, giving her a different version of the events. She said that after feeding the children, she took Kyle out of the high chair and, as usual, placed him on the playroom floor while she looked for his brother. But when she returned, Kyle was vomiting. She went to the kitchen to get a bowl to collect the vomit, and when she came back, Kyle had fallen. She said she picked him up, took him to the sink, and performed the maneuver that Renee had taught her in case any of the children stopped breathing, but it didn't work, and she also tried CPR. The paramedics transported Kyle to the nearest hospital after the initial treatment. When Renee arrived home, the ambulance with her son had already left, but the police were still on the scene. Renee took Ryan, the other twin, and asked Ada to accompany them. They followed the police, who escorted them to the hospital. During the trip, Renee called her husband, and they met at the medical center. A couple of minutes later, the doctors decided to transfer Kyle by helicopter to the Children's Hospital of Dallas. The Lazarchik family returned home, leaving Ada in charge of Ryan, and headed to the Children's Hospital of Dallas. Ada asked them to keep her informed about Kyle's condition. On the way to the hospital, Renee began to worry that Ada might be too anxious to properly care for Ryan, so she called a friend to help the babysitter at the house. Ada, visibly distressed and crying, opened the door for Rena's friend shortly after the friend arrived at the house. The friend asked Ada to explain what had happened. According to Ada's account, Kyle had suddenly collapsed while standing between the playroom and the kitchen. Ada said she dropped the plate she was holding, picked up Kyle, took him to the living room, and performed CPR on him. Ada mentioned that Kyle's brain hadn't fully developed and that this issue had started at birth. The friend didn't fully understand, but Ada kept talking, expressing her love for Kyle and assuring that she would never hurt him. The friend tried to calm her, reassuring her that she hadn't done anything wrong and that she was a good person. In the meantime, at the Dallas Children's Hospital, the Lazarchik family received devastating news. The doctor in charge of Kyle informed that the child had suffered severe head injuries, with multiple contusions on the head, left arm, and shoulder. A neurosurgeon met with the distressed parents to explain that something needed to be done to relieve the pressure on Kyle's brain, although survival was unlikely. A child abuse specialist who also met with Mike and Renee suggested that Kyle's injuries could be consistent with abuse. The specialist stated that Kyle's injuries were so severe, it was as if he had been in a car accident or fallen from a sixth-floor window. Renee initially found it hard to believe what had happened. She thought Ada might have accidentally dropped the child or was too scared or ashamed to admit it. However, the doctors clearly explained the severity of Kyle's head injuries and the amount of force required to cause them. Given this information, the possibility of an accident seemed unlikely. Renee promptly contacted another friend to pick up Ryan and remove him from the house. While this was happening in the hospital, Ada became increasingly anxious at home. Renee's friend had to go out to pick up her son from school and take him home. During her absence, Ada called her several times, asking if there was any news about Kyle. When Renee's friend returned to the house, she found Ada calm. Ada was no longer crying or talking. Shortly after, a police car passed by the house. Seeing it, Ada lost her composure. She began to cry uncontrollably and scream, "No, no, no," collapsing on the floor behind a door and repeatedly insisting that she would never harm Kyle. Two female detectives arrived to interview Ada. She was the only adult present when the incident occurred. As the detectives located the house and got out of their patrol car, they heard Ada's cries. Upon entering, they found her extremely agitated. During the interview, the other officer called the hospital to get an update on Kyle's condition. When they discovered the diagnosis, the detectives told Ada that her story did not explain Kyle's injuries. Ada suggested that Kyle may have hit his head when he fell after she left him alone in the playroom, but the officers pointed out that the playroom floor was covered in soft carpets, making this explanation unlikely. When trying to offer another explanation, Ada said that Kyle may have hit his head on the doorframe when she was carrying him on her hip. In the officer's insistence, Ada showed how Kyle could have hurt himself and mentioned that Mike and Renee often hit Kyle's head without any problem. The officer checked the place where Ada claimed Kyle hit his head, but found no evidence of a strong impact. When the officers told her that the injury did not seem serious enough to have caused the extensive damage described by the doctors, Ada insisted that the impact was strong because she was running with Kyle in her arms. She also claimed that she had never shaken or hit any of the twins. The officers urged Ada to tell the truth, as it could save Kyle's life, but Ada provided no further explanation. Given the circumstances, the officers reported the situation to their command and took Ada into preventive custody for further questioning. The investigation team arrived at the crime scene to examine the house. After completing their task, they informed Renee's friend, who was staying at the house on behalf of the owners, that they could clean up and organize everything for the family's return. While cleaning the house, the friend found a piece of adhesive tape sticking out from the door of a cabinet under the kitchen island. When they opened the door, they noticed it was broken and held together by tape. As a result, opening it caused the door to become misaligned. They simply placed it back and secured it with the tape, but found it strange because Renee was always careful with broken items to prevent the children from getting hurt. They had a hunch and called the police to report the door. Shortly after, investigators returned to collect potential evidence. Later, when questioned about the cabinet door, Renee stated that she frequently used that door and had never seen it held with adhesive tape. By the time Friday, October 14th arrived, all of Mike and Renee's hopes had vanished. The doctors informed them that Kyle was brain dead and had no chance of recovery. Amid unimaginable grief, the couple authorized the removal of life support, and Kyle passed away 3 days later on October 17th. The detectives interviewed Ada in prison, where she was accused of premeditated assault on a minor. This time, Ada claimed that the day before the incident, she was preparing the macaroni and cheese that Renee had requested. Kyle was sitting on the kitchen countertop, and the child fell, landing headfirst on the kitchen floor and hitting his head hard. Ada said she picked him up and checked for injuries. The only thing she noticed was redness on his ear and the right side of his head. So she applied cold compresses and gave him a pain reliever. When the interrogators asked why she hadn't told this to the other officers, Ada said she thought they wouldn't believe her. She mentioned that she didn't tell Renee because, when she arrived home from work, Renee complained of a severe headache. Ada said Renee suffered from migraines and had requested that the lights be turned off and the house be kept quiet. The interrogators asked if she had fallen with the child, which she adamantly denied. During that interrogation, Ada learned that Kyle had died, and she cried for the rest of the interview. Ada was brought before the courts, where a judge charged her with aggravated homicide and set bail at $750,000, which was beyond the means of Ada or her family. Consequently, she remained in custody until the trial. At that time, the police indicated that she might be charged with premeditated actions, which could carry the death penalty. The medical examiner who performed the autopsy on Kyle testified that when he received the child, Kyle was already unconscious. The examination revealed multiple hematomas, bruises, on the right side of Kyle's head, as well as bruises on the left side of his head, shoulder, and both arms. Additionally, there were 2 small hemorrhages forming hematomas on the right temple. These multiple areas of hematomas on Kyle's head indicated that he had suffered 3 separate impacts. The examiner noted that the bruises were relatively recent, with one possibly being 12 to 16 hours old. Internally, Kyle had brain and retinal bleeding, which is indicative of severe trauma. Although there were no broken bones, the brain tissue was notably swollen, and the pressure inside Kyle's head was 90 millimeters of mercury, significantly higher than the normal level of 20 millimeters. Based on these findings, the examiner concluded that Kyle had suffered severe traumatic events consistent with blunt force trauma, possibly from someone hitting his head against a hard object. The examiner suggested that the type of injuries could also result from shaking and swinging a young child's head against a solid object, such as a kitchen cabinet door. The crucial testimony of a forensic analyst revealed that the distance between the fasteners of the broken cabinet door in the kitchen matched the abrasion marks on Kyle's head. This expert also analyzed the adhesive tape used to repair the cabinet door and found 2 DNA traces, one of which had a greater contribution and matched Ada's DNA. The minor trace could not be identified. After hearing from the experts, it was time for Mike to testify. He explained that Kyle was doing well the evening of October 12th and the morning of October 13th with no bruises. He also mentioned that he made breakfast that morning, opened and closed the kitchen cabinets to get utensils and food, and that all the doors were in perfect condition, including the one that was later found with an unexplained taped repair. The parents said they had breakfast with the kids and played with building blocks, with the twins crawling around in a playhouse. Based on all the evidence, it was easily concluded that the events that led to Kyle's death occurred when there were no other adults in the house. The prosecutor in the case stated that the exact circumstances of what happened to Kyle may never be known with certainty, but according to the evidence presented at the trial, she outlined a possible scenario. Perhaps Kyle didn't want to eat his lunch and, feeling frustrated or distracted by watching a soap opera, may have gotten out of his high chair without realizing the cabinet door was open. The prosecutor speculated that Ada's rage could have provoked the violent attack on Kyle's head using the cabinet door until it broke, leaving marks on the child. After all the testimony and closing arguments, the jury retired to deliberate. When they returned, they decided Ada guilty of capital murder of a child under 6 years old. When the verdict was read, Ada's mother, Fernandez, who had traveled from Peru when her daughter was arrested, stood up and shouted that she would free Ada because she was innocent. She stated that there was no evidence to convict her daughter and swore to start over with an appeal. After the jury left, Kyle's parents showed photographs and videos of their late son and told about his short 14-month life, from birth to the last picture taken a few days before his death. Family members talked about Kyle, while others simply couldn't stop crying. Ada was convicted a year later in 2006 to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. For Ada and her family, giving up was not an option. Her parents immediately started a campaign to appeal the sentence, as they claimed that Ada's conviction was based on racism and ineffective public defense. But an appeal required money for legal representation and court costs, which the family did not have. In this case, Ada and her family have been continuously struggling to prove Ada's innocence. They are seeking support from various sources, including the Peruvian government, the Peruvian and Latino community in the United States, as well as solidarity organizations in Peru. In prison, Ada maintains her innocence and takes advantage of every opportunity for interviews. Their efforts have paid off, and in 2009, Ada's legal team filed an appeal citing 5 specific errors in the initial trial process. After reviewing the case, the appeals court rejected 3 claims but approved 2 claims. This was enough for the judges to overturn the verdict and cancel the trial due to irregularities. After this decision, Ada's family began fundraising efforts again to cover the $100,000 needed for a new trial. It took another 3 years to prepare for the new trial, which began on July 10, 2012, with the selection of 12 jurors from over 100 candidates. The defense maintained that Kyle fell from the kitchen counter on October 12 and sustained a head injury, and the situation worsened the next day when Ada, while running with the child in her arms, accidentally struck his head on the door frame. This time, the defense team presented testimony from a forensic expert with 40 years of experience. He suggested that some of Kyle's bruises may have been caused at the hospital during the insertion of a catheter to assess brain swelling. The prosecutor vehemently challenged this testimony. Another witness, an employee of the kitchen cabinet manufacturer, also testified for the defense, although he did not entirely rule out the possibility that Kyle's head could have hit the cabinet door. After the trial session was over, the jury deliberated for 5 hours, even requesting to listen to the 911 call recording again. Ultimately, they upheld the verdict. They once again found Ada guilty of premeditated murder and sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Her case remains the deeply contentious one, with her family continuing to fight for justice, asserting her innocence amid claims of a flawed judicial process and insufficient defense.